Okay, good evening. Welcome to a special meeting of the Board of School Directors, Monday, May 22nd, addressing enrollment growth, facilities planning, and student achievement. Before I turn the meeting over to Mr. Copeland and the administration, I want to provide some background and context for this evening's meeting. Tonight's meeting is not a formal business meeting, but rather a special meeting of the board to continue the ongoing discussion related to the expansion of facilities in response to the unprecedented increase in student enrollment in the district. Tonight's meeting will focus on our 6 elementary schools and the various issues pertaining to increased enrollment on their respective campuses. We will hold a second meeting on Monday, June 14th to discuss our secondary schools. As you might recall, we've had similar meetings of this nature. In fact, this is the 5th special meeting of the year to the school year related to enrollment growth and facilities planning. In February, the administration presented to the board and the public 8 strategies under consideration, and we followed up with a recent mailer, which you hopefully received. Our meeting this evening will be organized with presentations from each of our elementary principals, followed by facility-specific issues from Mr. Gannan and some summative commentary from Mr. Copeland. After each presentation, I will open the floor first for board questions and then for public comment following each elementary presentation for about 15 to 20 minutes per school. Please sign up with Ms. LaPera on the elementary school specific sheet to provide your comment or question. After all comments are heard for each elementary school, we'll open it up for general comments regarding the presentation this evening. Mr. Copeland and the administration will respond to as many questions as they are able, and we'll also continue to add to our frequently asked questions on enrollment growth, which can be found on our website. In addition to public comment this evening, we will release an electronic survey this week that solicits input from the district community on the issues discussed. And we will also welcome feedback on community comments at lmsd.org, as we always do. The feedback from both special meetings, as well as that collected from the survey, will be analyzed during the summer, presented and shared with the public at another special meeting when we return in the fall, to ensure as much participation from the community as possible. Your input is important to the board, and we also encourage members of the public to raise questions as well as provide feedback and commentary for the board to consider as we move closer to making decisions informed by district core values, which include maintaining current academic programming, strategic plan implementation, co-curricular and extracurricular programming, and class size targets, while being mindful of ongoing district fiscal constraints. I want to reiterate that the board was reminded of community values, particularly during the strategic planning and superintendent search processes. The board takes the values of small class size, maintaining and enhancing curricular programming, and attending neighborhood elementary schools very seriously and thoughtfully considers them in each of our decisions along with related costs. Our survey asks the public to share their thoughts on these values as well. While we will not make any decisions tonight, we will gather information for future decisions and also to inform a document the board has been working on for some time now, a needs assessment K-12, so that we can ensure that we put all this information together, share that with the public as well as the commissioners as we begin to make decisions that will positively benefit our students and family in the district. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Copeland.
Thank you, Dr. Van Lynch. Let me also, this has been a number of meetings that we've done as work sessions, but this one is being video recorded and will be available archived on the website. Before I turn it over to Mr. Gannan, just some opening comments. The district has been looking at the pace and the breadth of the enrollment growth in Lower Merion for some time now. I think we counted well over 100 different meetings about this topic since 2012 alone. This is the fastest growing school district in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the one with the highest number of student total growth by percentage as well, not by percentage, but in terms of numbers. Just some further context. In the summer of 2015, the district saw a significant amount of growth, more growth, I think, than the demographers had initially thought was going to be the case. So we looked at that again and said with Montgomery County Planning Commission, what might have happened? And one of the things they said was, we looked at the number of students who show up in schools, and Lower Merion's is exceeding its pace. In other words, one of the key scientific pieces that you look for in enrollment growth is what's called cohort survival. You look for the number of students who are born and then the number of students who end up showing up in school. We're seeing that Lower Merion's was outpacing what would be typically seen. So in the fall of 2015, the administration recommended to the Board of Education that they consider a strategy we call partner schooling. And that strategy reflected on a couple of things. One, because there's a high priority on class size, low class size in the district, whenever certain grade levels reached beyond their target class size, the district would traditionally open a classroom. The result of that open classroom might be the loss of a core facility like art or music or a large group instruction. So the administration recommended that the district look at the concept of partner schooling, meaning when somebody new moves into the community, we let them know ahead of time, when you register, you may not get the elementary school that was your neighborhood elementary school. And we did that last year after a lot of discussion amongst the board and the public, because this was brand new to the district and was somewhat disconcerting to say to somebody who moved into the community, thought that they had bought a house in a particular attendance zone and didn't get that placement. So we did a lot of work to make sure that everybody understood what we were doing. We didn't have last year, or this current year, as much of a need for the partner schooling as we thought we would. But with that, we still thought we wanted to make some changes, and I'll talk about that in a second. At the same time, we engaged two separate demographers to work independently to try and triangulate the data. What does it show us? And here's what the demographer said. The demographer said, while you've experienced this high growth in your elementary numbers, we think it's peaked. We think you're at a high water mark, and we think that you've reached as high as it will go. But that's not true for the secondary. Now, that's an unusual situation to see secondary numbers exceed that cohort survival. So we're saying, okay, so if that's the case, to what extent can we use partner schooling? And again, the purpose of that was to hold down excessive class sizes. So we looked at that, and we came back to the board and said, the way partner schooling worked last year was, if you signed up by June 1st and completed the registration by July 1st, you were guaranteed your home school. We asked the board, recommended to the board that we back that up, that if you signed up by May 1st and completed your registration by June 1st, you were guaranteed your home school. That change looks like it will allow us to be able to accommodate the current group of kids we have in our schools through partner schooling and still maintain our class size targets throughout the district. We still now need to decide what we do with our secondary schools. And through the course of the year, we brought to the board the circumstances that would take place at each of our middle schools. And right now, the concern is the growth at Bala Cynwyd Middle School, and that's been a lot of the reflection. So, what we wanted to do tonight, because we've talked a lot about facilities, we've looked at square footage, but we really wanted to put sort of a programmatic face on what we're seeing in our schools, to give the board and the public an opportunity to look at not just the numbers or not just the sort of the boxes, but what goes on in there to make sure that that's an integral part of what we're going to be discussing. So with that, Mr. Ganan is the star of the show, supported by, I'm sorry.
That's okay. There are a few seats up front if folks are standing, so you're welcome to come take a few seats up front rather than stand.
By way of introduction, can you hear me?
I can, but it's outside.
Thanks. By way of introduction, for those who may not be familiar with all of the elementary schools in the district, we have up on the screen, and we also have a couple of poster board versions of the elementary school attendance areas, attendance boundaries. They're shown in different colors. As you see there, we've highlighted some of the key roads within the school district so you can help get oriented on that. And so you feel free to refer to this at any point. And now I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Martino.
Thank you. What I first want to go through is basically our facilities at Kinwood Elementary School. Right now, our existing lower level plan, for the most part, is adequate. We have the gymnasium, the cafeteria. Most of our specials are down there, along with our kindergarten classrooms. Currently, we have 3 half-day kindergarten classrooms, along with an extended day kindergarten down there as well. Some of the change happened in my last 5 years, starting with the first floor. About 4 years ago, the section, we used to have a large group room. That large group room was turned into a classroom. And then 2 years ago, our computer lab was turned into a classroom as well. So right now, with the first floor and our lower level and our second floor, we're pretty much at capacity when it comes to every room is being utilized for either a classroom or support service. We do have would be considered a classroom in the back of our library. Right now, there's the occupational therapy is back there. Can I actually use that? Oh, look at that. Occupational therapy is back there, speech is back there, and ELL. Now, we could possibly, if need be, turn that into a classroom, but then we would have to look at other areas of renovation to find another place for those services. When we go through our upper level, our existing second floor, right now that is for our 3rd grade, 4th grade, and primarily 5th grade classrooms. Right now, once again, all of those are being utilized for regular ed classrooms and/or instructional purposes. We currently have 3 learning support classrooms in our building. We also have a diagnostic classroom that embraces all of the students from throughout the district. And we have a autistic support / learning support classroom that we utilize as well. As we talked about before, now first off, we don't have an auditorium at Kinwood Elementary. We do have a gymatorium, along with obviously our space with the cafeteria. We did lose our large group instruction room. The cafeteria, as I mentioned before, gymnasium, library, and art are adequate, as is our music, as is our other parts of our facility, but we did lose our computer lab, or our computer room, to designate that as a classroom about 2 years ago.
One of the things that we did when we updated our, I neglected to mention, we updated our enrollment. We also updated with the help of our architect, Gilbert and Associates, the facilities plan. So Mr. Ganana is going to talk about the enrollment as well as some other particulars. Go ahead.
Right, so this slide just summarizes past enrollment since 2010 and future enrollment based on the most recent projections using the worst case, whichever demographer had the highest numbers. As you can see here for Kinwood, our highest projected enrollment is expected in 2022-23, and it would be 551 students. After that, between that time frame and toward the end of the projection, 27, it would average at 528. So this table presents the details of calculating the classroom capacity of the school, and it comes right out of the building capacity study that the superintendent just referred to. In the left column, each grade level is shown, and then in the next column, you see the number of classrooms there are for each grade level. Next, there's 2 columns that show the number of students that can be assigned in each classroom, and then the total number for the grade level. The first set of columns refers to PDE, or Pennsylvania Department of Education, means of calculating, and this is basically based on the formula that they use for determining reimbursement for renovations or construction. The second set of columns shows the number of students per classroom using Lower Merion School District class size guidelines. And just so you don't get freaked out, it says 40 there for kindergarten because it accounts for 2 half-day sessions of 20 students each, so that would be 40. So again, the far right column totals that up. As I mentioned earlier, the PDE values represent capacities calculated for reimbursement of renovations or construction, while the intent of the reimbursement program is to bring schools up to current educational standards. The formula has not been updated since 1973. It doesn't reflect current educational requirements such as special education and other support services like English language learners, speech, occupational, and physical therapy, and current practices such as least restrictive environment. Lastly, the capacity calculation applies a utilization factor of 90% for the LMSD values, which reflects the fact that not all space can be effectively used at all times, especially given that students don't arrive at school in groups that exactly match the class size guidelines. So therefore, this capacity table shows a capacity at Kinwood of 558. We can then take that number and compare it to the highest projected enrollment, which shown here is 551, and you can see that we will have some capacity left over. And then if you look at the average after the highest projected enrollment out through the end of the projections, it also shows that there is capacity available.
This is important information, but there are some limitations. So we did do some partner schooling this year, and I think twice or 3 times students came in to Kinwood. And so while it looks like there's space in Kinwood, they came into Kinwood in grades that had already reached their maximum, and so they were partner schooled out of that, which is why the numbers don't, you know, if someone says, well, there's extra room, there is, but it may not be extra room in the places where you need, if you want to maintain one of the district values in terms of good class sizes. This year, I think they were partner school to Marion.
That's correct.
Okay, so moving along, I want to point out here that it's important not to, I guess you would say, overinterpret the numbers. The ability of a school building to accommodate a given number of students can be considered as a continuum, bound on one side by the optimal building capacity, which would be the best case, and on the other end by an enrollment that could only be accommodated by compromising the educational program. So school capacity is not solely a function of the number of classrooms in a building. Rather, it must reflect the building's ability to accommodate the entirety of the district's required and desired educational programming. This incorporates necessary allocations of dedicated space to programs such as music, art, special education, PE, and library. The LMSD optimal classroom capacity described above does not address those programmatic factors, and thus to come up with a building optimal capacity, you would have to take into account whatever adjustments have had to have been made. And you have just heard a few things from Dr. Martino. Ultimately, the building capacity determination has to be done in close consultation with experienced administrators who are familiar with the educational programming delivered at the school. Next, I'd like to talk briefly about the site. This is a shot from our friends at Google. This is a map. The thing about Kinwood Elementary School is it's on the same parcel as Bala-Kinwood Middle School. Officially, there is one parcel of land. It is 14.06 acres, and the zoning is R4. Why is zoning important? Why are we highlighting this? Is because where a school lies, which zoning district it lies in, can determine its ability to expand. In other words, it directly affects the amount of impervious surface that's allowed to be on that property. So our allowable impervious surface here is 44%. We are maxed out. We're currently at 46.87% because from the time they approved the 44 until now, the track suddenly became impervious through just a change in law, a redefinition of impervious. So we actually have no additional space. And so that dovetails with the idea that in order to get approval for our temporary classrooms, we had to go to the zoning hearing board and request a variance for impervious surface. And we were successful in that for the modular classrooms.
Thank you, Mr. Ganea. So before we move to Marion, I'd like to open it up for questions from the board first. And again, if you are interested in providing public comment on any of the schools, we're starting with Kenwood, please do. I'm going to start at my left and go around. So, Mr. Fetterman, any questions? Okay, Ms. Ackman?
Maybe for the good of the audience. Kenwood's getting very into STEM makerspace, and do you feel like the current facility can support that? And just, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're thinking with that?
Well, we currently, over spring break, we're able to convert a portion of our library into a makerspace area. So we're utilizing that space to kind of enhance that opportunity at Kenwood. It is a driving force. It's actually a driving force basically by my teachers who are excelling in that area and our students. But right now, the only optimal large group space we have and we're utilizing is our library. So we're trying to use that in multiple ways to connect with that STEM initiative.
That's great, and I think that the school's been very creative in your utilization of space to support that more programmatic effort. And it's lucky we have the library to keep it very flexible. So, anyway.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonaventura?
I have a couple questions that are generic that I'll wait till the end to see if they get answered through the course. But Kenwood specific, you mentioned a diagnostic classroom?
Yes.
That's
Currently,
used, where's that? Is that a full-size classroom?
it is not a full-size classroom. Actually, it maxes out at 8 students. We normally carry around from 8 to 10 students within there. It's a smaller classroom that sits just off of our cafeteria.
And you say that's used district-wide?
It is. All the students who would qualify for diagnostic kindergarten, which is a full-day program, would come to Kenwood Elementary School. Actually, this year, all 8 of our students, next year as first graders, would actually go back to their home school, the other 5 elementary schools. So it's a full-day program. In the morning, we run diagnostic. The kids stay for recess lunch, and then we have them move into and have regular day kindergarten in the PM.
Dr. Gilbert?
Thanks for the presentation. Actually, well, I'm not sure you can see it on the map. Is it possible to describe, I know that you share space with Bala Kenwood Middle School. How does that work?
Jason Potton has been awesome. Now, really,
That's a
what
good
it is
answer.
the middle school uses it for different they're going to be coming out for rocket things. We basically accommodate to each other's schedule. Our recess lunch, starting around 11:15 and ending right around 1:30, 1:35, our students are out there either utilizing the field or the playground's equipment on it off to the side. That pretty much is, as we call it, a sacred field. You really can't build anything permanent on there, although we were able to get a gaga pit just off the track area. But really, it's basically just connecting with the middle school and making sure our schedules work out, which has pretty been accommodating.
I'm going to ask my question as we go around. So, Dr. Martino, you mentioned space as adequate, and when I hear adequate, I think adequate versus ideal. Are there things with regard to some of the spaces that you talked about? I believe you talked about the cafeteria, the gymnasium. Could you just speak to some of those core spaces and potentially where you might see some issues? Or is adequate also ideal in terms of how you're describing those spaces?
I have to say, right now, at the lowest level that we have, adequate would be as close to ideal as we could possibly get, with what our current capacity is. The cafeteria holds exactly 5 classrooms. We have 5. I can live with that and working through. Same with the gymnasium. It's large enough for that. What we do run into right now, and I think Mr. Ganane touched on that, was our requirements for autistic support, learning support. When you start to talk about an autistic support / learning support classroom, there are legal items that we have to fall into as far as age of students and in the classroom at the same time. So we do have, on a few occasions, some of our students in those classrooms go to different parts of the building, whether it be the library for maybe a half an hour of instruction or 45 minutes of instruction, depending, in small group, to kind of basically accommodate them a little bit better. So that would be more adequate than ideal when it comes to those types of services.
Thank you. Ms. Pollard, any questions? Ms. Robinson?
My questions were answered, thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you. For the 14 acres, is that just the site where Bala Cynwyd and Cynwyd are? Does it include or exclude Amherst Field?
It excludes Amherst Field.
Because that is a separate property.
Correct.
Okay.
Hi,
Dr.
could you just talk a little bit about the traffic and drop off and pick up and how that's
Or
working out?
the ice cream truck that decides to go. When we added on the expansion, we lost our, and if I can bring it up, basically we do not have a parking lot, which basically this is just a bus circle. We have a bus circle in this area right here, and off to the side right here is our morning pickup drop-off. What we also implemented, for safety reasons, we have about 280 students that are walkers or car riders. Any students in K through 3 who doesn't have a sibling, and they're going to be a walker or car rider, comes into the gymnasium area. The parents need to park or find some sort of stop and go parking over here to come down, because they actually come in and then we release them individually to their parents. So this does get a little congested in the PM. In the AM, this over here for the drop-off gets a little congested. What we've accommodated that with, we actually have a person, my head custodian is now stationed out there to keep the traffic moving as well as possible. Once again, it's adequate, it's not ideal when it comes to those services.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the board before we open it up? Okay. Please, Ms. LaPera, would you call the first speaker?
There's no names on the list, so if you, please come up and sign in. Thanks.
If you're interested in speaking on Cynwyd presentation, if you could please sign up with Ms. LaPera right now, and then we'll also have opportunity for folks to speak on the other 5 elementary schools that will be presented as well.
Thank you.
Hi, I heard traffic was an issue. I was wondering at Penwyn.
Can you please say
Oh,
your
sorry.
name?
My name's Tanya Schreiber. I'm from Penwyn. I'm from the Penwyn area, and I was wondering if you have considered the idea that's worked at Penwyn, which is opening the school 5 minutes early to relieve some of the traffic issues. Have you been approached with that idea?
We're already at 9 o'clock, 8:40. We're already
Okay. I'm sorry.
Cynwyd already operates at the same time as Penwyn.
Yeah.
Okay. And second question is, so to confirm the numbers, in 2015 you were in 559, and you don't anticipate reaching that level. There's going to be a gap of 7 years before you reach that number of students again. So there's 7 years before you get back to 551, and in the meantime you're below that level, right?
Yes, at this time. Pat, I want to turn that over to you for any of the enrollment calculations. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Leibowitz. I'm the president of the Marion Park Civic Association, and I very much appreciate you having these meetings for the public. I wanted to comment specifically on Cynwyd because it's immediately adjacent to the Marion Park catchment area, our community. And first of all, I'll say that I've spoken to Mr. Ganan and several of the other representatives of the school district at several points, and we've been very appreciative of the cooperative dialogue, specifically around the middle school. With specific regard to Cynwyd and what we've seen this evening, one of the things that I want to point out is that the current demographic information is based on students who are in the district. So we look at children who are born here, we put a factor on that for children who will move here, and I want to point out something that we're seeing in several points around the township, but I think that you're going to see a lot of in the Cynwyd Elementary School catchment area. That's the rezoning of the M district from a manufacturing district to a residential district. I had a chance to go down to West Conshohocken, where O'Neill Properties built a fairly comparable, Conshohocken, where O'Neill Properties built a property that's very comparable to what's being developed and just coming online literally these weeks over in near River Road in Ballackinwood. There are children who are living in that building. There are school buses that are picking up elementary, middle, and high school students at that property. And I think it's very reasonable to expect that even if it's not a huge density, we're talking about hundreds of apartments. On top of that, we're talking about apartments that are slated to be built by Federated on St. Asaph Road, and depending on exactly where we end up with redistricting, also Rock Hill Road, one side of it technically at this moment falls into the Kenwood catchment area. It's not a big deal at this point because very few people live on Rock Hill Road, but all it would take would be another building on a property that's already been zoned for it, that is being marketed as a location for multifamily. So I know that there's a lot of different pieces to balance here, but I just want to point out very specifically that Kenwood could become a community that could have another 100 students. The other thing I just want to say briefly, and I'm sure that we're going to hear about it as all of the other schools present, is that right now the extra classroom, quote-unquote extra classroom at Kenwood Elementary School is that library classroom that's being used for special education, English language learners, and autistic students. And I think what we are going to hear over and over again is that as our space becomes crunched, it is those students and those programs that seem to lose their space first. And those are the students who can least afford to lose the designated space, the quiet space, the space that's been designed and dedicated for their use. So I hope that as we listen to all the presentations about all the schools, we'll consider that specific element, which is that it is our students who are most in need of the space and the services who somehow or others seem to keep losing their spots in our schools. I appreciate all of your help. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just summarize, Mr. Leibowitz. One of the areas that the two demographers disagree on is the amount of students who will come out of coming online multiple occupancy units. So that's one of the things that we're watching very carefully.
Okay, any more speakers, Ms. LaPere? Okay, so we will move on.
We are at Marion Elementary School.
Sure. And you can use this if you like to point.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see everyone again, since we were here last week for our 25-year celebration. Just to look at our existing lower level map for Marion, pretty much the lower level is dedicated to kindergarten for regular education classes. Kindergarten and all of our second grade classes are clustered downstairs. And if you look at the map in the middle area, that middle hallway where the dark blue classes are, those are dedicated to some of our specialized learning programs. So for example, the lavender room that has the subdivided room used to be our vocal music classroom, and in 2015, because of an increase in our artistic support program numbers.
Could you point to lavender, since some of us
sure.
may not
Right.
necessarily know?
Right there. I know there's like lavender, dark blue.
I know my.
Just, I mean.
So that used to be the vocal classroom for music, and in 2015 we subdivided that to accommodate the increase in growth in our autistic support classrooms. So that that has made the vocal music program on a cart right now, and so the music teacher does not have a dedicated space for music instruction. She's traveling from room to room, and 2 to 3 periods a week she's teaching in the lobby when she's doing 5th grade staging for play practice or anything where the kids need a little bit more space to move around. Coming down this hallway across the, I'm sorry, this is lavender, this is dark blue. This classroom was also in 2005 when we did the renovations supposed to be dedicated for the instrumental music room. It never saw instrumental music instruction in that room. It started off as a learning support classroom and then was reallocated to accommodate our increases in gifted support. So that's a room that 2 years ago was subdivided as well with a permanent wall, and we have our 2 gifted support teachers servicing children in the gifted support program. Next door, this other room right here is for our current district emotional support program. Many of you know that Marion houses the emotional support program that's in our district. And so I will go back to reiterate what Dr. Martino says, adequate, but not ideal. Because as we see children coming in with more and more learning needs, we want to make sure we're providing them with the space and the allocations they need for occupational therapy, physical therapy. This room across the hallway used to be occupational therapy. Our occupational therapist used to work with children in this room, and as of this February, because of an increased enrollment in our emotional support room, we reclaimed that as swing space. So we're using that as instructional space for children in the emotional support program. And then down here, this other dark blue, this is also a learning support classroom. The rest of the classrooms on the lower level are all regular education classroom. None of our current special education classroom programs right now are in a full-size classroom. They are in seminar rooms or full-size rooms that have been subdivided to accommodate the growth in special education. Over here, this is our art classroom. We do have a dedicated art classroom at this time. That room were to have to be converted to something else would need some renovation because we have all windows and no cubbies and a lot of storage space for artwork and the kiln. So it's not the standard space of a regular sized classroom. So that's pretty much the lower level. Moving over to the right side here, this area is used currently for the instrumental music program. So 3.5 days a week between the band and the orchestra lessons, our teachers are providing direct instruction to 4th and 5th graders on a rotating basis for both of those music programs, which leads us to use the auditorium for large group assemblies, programs when we bring in outside speakers, grade level meetings. We're pretty much limited to Tuesday afternoons and Friday for the use of the auditorium, because those are the days that we don't have instrumental music. I'm going to move to the next floor. So moving to the upper level, the existing upper level plan. Upstairs, we have 1st grade classrooms along with 3rd grade classrooms and 5th grade classrooms. So grades 3, 4, and 5 are all in green, and the yellow classes over here are all 1st grade. Currently having 5 sections of each grade level. Right here, this area right here used to be the computer lab, and again in 2015 we lost the computer lab to accommodate increased enrollment, so that's a 5th grade classroom right now. And then we do have one room over here which, again, back in when we did the original renovation, used to be used for the MELC enrichment program, and we had the kindergarten students on site for the opposite part of the day. That is a 3rd grade classroom currently and has been for the last several years. Gym space, currently adequate, more than adequate actually for gym space. We do double up a few classes when we have to teach kindergarten, but that's only 2 periods a week. So pretty much the gym space is a great facility, and then many days the gym teacher will take the children outside, which is to the field right over here. Office space, conference room, pretty much adequate space in all of those areas. And then behind the library, these 2 spaces here are seminar rooms, math specialist, and reading support, services children in small groups. And then the smaller rooms in the back, what used to be the old library. We have the psychologist's office. This double room right here is used by speech, and we have currently 2 speech therapists who are sharing the space. For the first half of the year, one speech therapist would work back here, but starting in February when our extended day kindergarten program starts, that space gets claimed for the EDK program, and so then the speech therapists find what other space they can use that somebody's not using to work with children. And then here's our other specialized learning support program that supports children in grades 4 and 5 on the upper level. And that's pretty much the floor plan at this point in terms of how we're using space. Just to reiterate what Dr. Martino says, our cafeteria, our biggest issue with the cafeteria is because it's sub-level and we have low ceilings, and most of the 4th grade kids can reach up and hit the ceiling when they're going through to lunch. But we have adequate space currently with the grade enrollments doing 1 lunch period at a time. Again, I said the gym, library, those spaces are fine, and the art room serves its purpose for this current year. The challenge with music, both instrumental and vocal music, is again the vocal music program is on a cart, and looking at space when the music teacher wants to do things special units for kids, and trying to move materials back and forth to rooms sometimes can be a challenge in terms of program implementation. And then again, the instrumental music program is 3.5 days a week that we utilize that space. Going back to special education, adequate but not ideal for some of our specialized learning programs, as I think one of the speakers commented on earlier. And then for gifted speech, English as a second language, and FLES. Our FLES programs, Spanish and French, are in the classrooms, but the teacher does have a little bit of a space that he shares with the ESL teacher and the instructional support teacher. Those actually, the rooms where ESL is currently, those children are currently being serviced, used to be a teacher's planning room. So we really have, other than the teacher's lunchroom, which has doubled for planning, we actually we do not have teacher planning spaces, because those spaces have been reclaimed for English as a second language. And then downstairs, the literacy specialist is working in one of those rooms. And again, no computer room. That's been retaken by 5th grade due to increased enrollment. And I would say our administrative space is adequate. Probably ideal, because I have a great view of Bowman Avenue and I could see the car loop and pickup. So thank you. Be happy to answer any questions. Oh, but you're going next, right?
Right, okay. Right. Again, this is a review of the enrollment history and the enrollment projections per the latest studies that were done last fall. We see that we're going to hit our highest projected enrollment of 644 students in the 2023-24 timeframe. The average after that, going out to 2027, is 639 students. So let's take a look at the capacity table for this building. And again, everything is set up the way I described it for Kinwood. We have the number of classrooms for each grade level. We have the PDE information for comparison purposes. We have the Lmsb information based on our class size guidelines. And we apply our utilization factor, and we come up with a optimum classroom capacity of 599. Now, those of you who are perceptive probably picked up on the fact that last fall we had more than 599 students in the building. And in fact, we will have more than 599 going up to highest projected enrollment, and even after that, as you see here. And I think you've already heard the impacts to program that enrollment increases have had to the school. Just a brief word here about the site. Again, there's an aerial photograph of the site. The parcel is 8.2 acres, as shown there. It's zoned R4. Allowable impervious is 39. We're at 36.4%. So if you subtract those two, we have about 9,337 square feet of impervious that we could add. One of the things I'd like to point out here is that based on the last land development approval we received, which was 2003, there's quite a bit of reserve parking designated for the site that is included in those impervious numbers. They're shown here in dotted lines. There's reserve parking spaces inside the bus loop, and then reserve parking spaces that extend out into this field right here.
And maybe anticipating Dr. O'Leary's question about beginning and ending of the day, maybe Mrs. Heffron could speak to that now, since she's there. Drop-off, pickup.
Morning or afternoon? I guess that doesn't make any difference.
Why don't you start with the morning?
Let's start with the morning drop-off. Okay. So we do, when the renovation was finalized in 2005, there was a drop-off loop that was added, which actually cuts through part of the smaller staff lot. And we do have staff members out there in the morning. So children can be dropped off who are being transported by car at 8:40 in the morning. And because the cars are coming in at a staggered pace, it's not as challenging in the morning as it is at dismissal time. We will have people pulling up in the lot at 3 o'clock, pulling all the way up to the front of the lot, and are backed up onto Bowman Avenue over the bridge some days for car loop. And so if you're trying to get onto Bowman Avenue, sometimes it's hard to make that right-hand turn if you're trying to come over the bridge. And the walkers come out. We have staff members supervising. We want to make sure that we're loading children into cars safely and making sure everybody's in cars with seatbelts before cars pull away. But we do have a considerable amount of children who are picked up at the end of the day, and it does cause some congestion onto Bowman Avenue. The other issue I think on Bowman is because there is parking allowed on Bowman, the buses have somewhat of a challenging time sometimes trying to make the loop or trying to make the turn at the the traffic light. And we always tell visitors, if you come to Marion, make sure you put your side view mirrors in, because when people are driving past, not necessarily during a dismissal time, but during the regular school day, many people have lost side view mirrors because the street is so narrow and it's really tight to try to navigate it on a school day when there are events and parents are parking on Bowman Avenue to come to school events. So that's a challenge to our pickup and drop off.
Thank you. I'll open it up now to board questions. I'll start at my right this time. Dr. O'Leary.
Yeah, so this is the site that a number of community members have suggested that this is where we would build. And I know there are some challenges to building on the site. And I'm wondering if someone can sort of speak to those. I imagine it's Pat.
I think as I pointed out, there is some impervious surface left, and I think that would be sufficient for some sort of an addition. I think your biggest challenge here is your parking and traffic. If we were to add on to the building and increase with a resulting increase in enrollment, we would have to negotiate with the township as to how they want us to deal with it. The reason we ended up with all this reserved parking in the past was because the neighborhood at the time preferred to keep parking on Bowman Avenue because they saw it as a traffic calming device, and I'm sure some still do that. And so they told us they didn't want us to add a lot of extra parking, so we were able to get that parking placed in reserve. But if we were to add more, I'm not sure what the township would ask of us. I think there's a possibility we could well, let me just say this. The areas we have looked at for expansion of the school are right behind the gymnasium here. There is hard surface play area here, so you could actually put it there and have a relatively good connection to the rest of the school.
Pat, was there some core space issues with cafeteria?
Right. I was going to talk about core space at the end. But
okay.
Can we talk about Amanda based on her question?
Well, actually, I was thinking more about, I'm reaching way back to discussions that were years and years ago, but Bowman Ave is the only entrance and exit to that school, correct?
That's correct.
It's my understanding that there was a sort of a safety issue in getting the school to be much larger and more traffic around it. Is that correct, or is that just a rumor?
Well, as I mentioned, there's always concern about when you go in with plans to expand about what the traffic and the parking is going to look like. And that's why we do traffic studies and et cetera. I think we did create a separate parent pickup drop-off loop as the principal described right here. I think the thing that nobody really anticipated is what the traffic situation would turn out to be on many of the afternoons. As she described, we have traffic that backs up back here.
Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you. I guess my question appears to me that both pickup for children by car and bus, they're both coming in the same direction, mostly down the page. So what's your conflict with passenger cars and buses trying to get into their respective loops to pick up children?
Well, we have two separate loops. This is what we tried to do in the last.
But they have to. I'm saying they have to approach from like the top of the page coming down, I believe.
Right. So as you know, Bowman is two-way street. So you can turn left into this. If this is already filled up and you want to get in line, you have to turn around and come down from the other direction. The buses come from both directions and are able to come into the bus loop. And I think we have sufficient space in the bus loop in the afternoon, again, because the buses arrive not all at the same time.
The other thing for morning arrival and afternoon pickup is that we do have right turn only between 8 and 9:15 a.m. and between 3 and 4. So when parents are exiting the car loop, they're supposed to turn right. And most people do turn right, but when someone has to turn left, it really does cause a little bit of a backlog in the loop.
Ms. Robinson, any questions?
It appears that we have, let me see. So we have 614 or 611 students there now, and we're projecting 644. So we're going to have a shortfall. I guess we need to plan on how we're going to address that, and I'm just wondering if there's any particular areas that that pose problems for you, like the cafeteria, the assemblies, things like that.
Currently, our cafeteria is relatively small compared to, to other spaces. And right now, we have one grade level at a time. I mean, my largest grade level currently right now is my 5th grade. And they are probably the tightest in. We have 6 tables, and we have one swing space for children that, have allergies and have to eat at a peanut-free table. But there's not a lot of space from wall to wall. The other issue, too, at the cafeteria is that MELC uses that before and after school for the programs and have a lot of their materials in there. So that takes up a lot of floor space. So that's another issue for cafeteria space as well.
Mrs. Pollard?
Could you just please clarify with your special education students? You said gifted, adequate but at a limit. And did you say they do not have a permanent space?
They don't have what would be considered a full-size classroom. They all have spaces. They all have dedicated space for instruction. So, for example, I have 2 learning support classes, 2 autistic support classes, and 1 emotional support class, and that's a district program. The 2 learning support classes have a dedicated separate space, but it is not a full-size classroom. It was a seminar room that they use. For instruction for the children. And then the music room became divided to allow both of the autistic support programs. We have a teacher that services children in grades K through 2 and another one that services children in grades 3 through 5. So every program has dedicated space, but in terms of about ideal, the spaces are really not large. And for children that need occupational therapy and physical therapy and movement breaks and other things to do as part of their program, in my opinion, the space is a little constrictive.
Okay, thank you.
My question is along the lines of Mrs. Pollard's. Specifically, you mentioned, Ms. Heffron, about the speech therapist not having a dedicated space. Can you speak to some of the scheduling challenges and if not having the adequate space for speech therapy impacts the students being able to, I know their time is designated and it's within a, based on whatever their IEP designates. So if you could speak to some of those challenges, that'd be helpful.
So in the beginning of the year, it's not as challenging because we do use the room that's allocated for the extended day kindergarten program. So one speech therapist is in the first part of the room and there's a wall and a door in between it. And then the other speech therapist works with children in the back part of the room. So they've divided caseloads up by like grade levels and schedules. And so much from a scheduling perspective, the speech therapists collaborate with the classroom teachers to make sure that the children get the services when they need them and when the best ideal time is to support them. When we hit that February mark and the EDK program moves into that room, the speech therapists will either work with children. Sometimes they will push into the classroom and work in the back of the room. Sometimes they will work in an area right outside the speech room. Sometimes they will use the back of the library and an area of the back of the library. But the children receive their services. It's just a matter of relocating sometimes where it needs to be.
Dr. Gilbert? Ms. Devonna Ventura?
A couple questions. First a comment. The capacity numbers, especially for a school like Marion that has the autistic support and the emotional support classes, those are students who are assigned an autistic support room and an emotional support room rather than a regular classroom, is that correct?
No, all of our children who are in specialized learning programs are assigned to a homeroom and are included to the degree that their IEP details. So some children are included for a portion of the day. Some children receive direct instruction in social skills in that smaller group seminar room. Some of the children receive actual academic instruction from teachers as well, but children are also included for science and social studies and all their special area classes and sort of special activities. It really depends on the child's IEP and what's appropriate for that child.
Okay, so previously those students pretty much spent the whole day in their support class and that's no longer the case?
We have very few students that are in the support class a whole day. There may be days, depending on a child, if a child's having a particularly
Right.
difficult day, where they'll, spend it because they need that
But I'm thinking of
time.
assigned.
No, not.
Okay. And then just another, I don't know, comment / question is, the highest projected enrollment is 7 years out. And that's a lot of uncertainty between now and then. So, I mean, we can keep our fingers crossed and hope that the numbers hold, but we have a little time before it's panic time.
Ms. Ackman?
Excuse my, I wouldn't say ignorance, but I just was wondering, how many students, can students come to the school, walk to school from the back?
Yes, Rockland Avenue is behind the school, so we have a lot of children that live in Narberth that walk and live in that area right behind the school. So on any given day, judged by the amount of children at dismissal time that go out the walkers line, we probably have over 100, 125 students that walk from behind the school, and then we have children, also walkers that are Bowman walk. We have Bowman walkers and Rockland walkers.
So perhaps that helps mitigate some of the congestion that would, I mean, I don't know if anything can mitigate it. But
And there's limited parking back there on Rockland Avenue, and sometimes parents will come and park their cars in Rockland and wait for their children back there, but that's kind of a tight spot back there, and there's not a lot of parking on Rockland Avenue either.
Right,
Yeah.
but you do use
Oh, children do go
that.
back, yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's allowed,
Yep.
and, okay.
Just jump in real quick on that. If we rebuild the Rockland Avenue Bridge, it would
Right.
take a lot of pressure off that site.
Right.
That'd be great.
When you say "we,"
Yeah.
We the collective.
Yeah, she
We the
means
people.
Some government entity. And I just wanted to clarify on the sketch slide, maybe, Pat, this is a question for you. So that green space that has nothing on it, that's where the houses are. So that's not blank.
I'm sorry, yeah, the houses are here
That,
and
okay,
here, and then we have neighbors down below.
okay. So
Right.
it's not like that's an open field.
That's correct. That could be
okay.
misleading. I look at this all the time.
Yeah, because at first I thought, oh,
Right,
can
we have neighbors all the way along.
Right, which is shown on the photo.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was correct. Thank you.
Mr. Fetterman?
Thanks for that presentation. It sounds like you're using the space pretty much efficiently as you can. Would that be a fair statement? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's what it sounds like to me.
Thank you.
I just have one comment and then a question, is that I don't want to give a spoiler alert here, but I think we're fine throughout the presentations that all the schools have various issues with the enrollment growth across the district. And one of the things that I guess we need to deal with and the community has to deal with is how do we approach this and weigh all the various issues that each school presents in terms of how to solve the problem and make sure our kids get educated in an environment that we believe is optimal. But my question is really for Pat, and that's with regard to the projected enrollments slide. I'm not sure what number it is, 17, I guess. Is there any breakdown? And I haven't looked at the actual studies in a long time, the ones these are based on or they come from. But is there a breakdown in terms of grades in the enrollment?
There is.
Okay,
There
I mean,
is.
is it even throughout? Or is it like just a big grade one that goes through the system? And I know you probably didn't have it memorized. I
don't
can't
know.
remember it either, but
There might be
that would
somebody near
important.
you who's looking at the actual numbers. Did you have an answer for that, or?
My recollection is that the demographers are pretty good on big. As you start to narrow down and look at grades, that gets to be trickier and trickier.
Right. I mean, one of the questions, I guess, would be, as we go further, we get a better idea if there's like a bubble of kids that are passing through as opposed to.
Yeah, and that does happen. I don't know that I don't recall a specific fifth grade huge number in variation. Do you? I don't recall that.
I'd have to look at
Yeah, we'd have to look at that.
Thank you.
Dr. O'Leary, please.
Sorry, to follow up on the concept that there's a bubble. You have to be really careful to understand that after 5 years, the demographers just put in the same number. So if you're a growing district, after that 5-year period, it's going to look like a bubble. It's going to go down because you're averaging growth versus steady, and so you're going to have a lower number. So no matter what, it's going to, after this 5-year, kids that are currently born, it's going to look like it's going down.
Yeah, and we're gonna, I'm gonna recommend another demographic report because that we can add on for one more year. And the other situation that's occurring is we're getting a significant in-migration at the secondary level, which is atypical of districts.
Anybody else? Okay. Public comment for
We have
Marion.
Tracy Coyle, Heidi White, and Amy Badler. If you want to come up, and you can just line up over here. Did you already sign in? Ah, okay. Anybody that would like to sign in, please come up now.
Is that okay to go? Hi, my name is Tracy Coyle, and I am a parent at Marion, and I'm also the co-president of the HSA. I've had 3 kids go through Marion, 2 are there currently, and I just want to point out that I think Marion's in a little bit of a different situation because of the support services that we offer. As the only building that offers emotional support, I think that needs to be a consideration for the way our space is used. I happen to have a 4th grade daughter who is in the classroom that used to be the emotional support classroom. And across from the emotional support classroom are 2 padded rooms. And next to the emotional support classroom is the current emotional support classroom, which looks like it used to be an office. It does not appear to be a classroom at all. It's very small. They have had to leave their room 10 times this year, conservatively. My daughter will, we talk at lunch and, talk at dinner, and she would mention that, that there were some issues outside her room that day, and they'd had to leave. And not only do they have to leave, they walk by the child who's having the issue. They know who these kids are. They walk up and they try to find space in the library, which is already having classes held in it, so they're sharing a classroom space in the library, or they go to the auditorium, which is only unoccupied on Tuesday afternoons and Fridays. And while they're going to the auditorium, they're walking through the music class that's currently being held in the lobby of the auditorium. And I know that instruction has been lost, hours of instruction, because the teacher will have to leave the room and that is not always prepared to bring all of her materials with her for the kids to learn. I also know that the kids have not been permitted to use the bathroom for certain periods of time because there's a student having an issue outside the classroom. So I just want to point out that while you see deficits up for Marion and you think that we're using our space adequately, I think Anne's done a great job, the teachers are doing a great job, but I really want to stress that it is not an ideal situation and that the student privacy and their dignity is really what's being taken advantage of here in this crowded situation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Heidi White. Amy and Lauren, if you want to come and line up over here on the side, that'd be great. Thank you.
So here's why I tell you that I screwed up and we thought that was the sign-in sheet. So Amy and I signed up and we didn't know we were going to speak, but as it happens, I wanted to speak anyway. So I think Amy's going to let me speak on her behalf. Heidi White. I have 2 children, one who is finishing at Marion and another who's at Ballackinwood Middle School. And I have to say, I've been in and out of the school a lot. I walk my children to school, or before the younger one started sprinting and I couldn't keep up and I let him walk. But I will say that I've seen the school expand over time, and I understand the comment from one of the board members that we're not in panic mode yet, that the peak isn't for 7 years. But I have to say, itinerant music is not a good solution. And I've walked through that building because she's teaching in the lobby half the time. And I can go on my tiptoes. I'm telling you, it's very distracting. And I think as a district, and all of the elementary schools value arts and music education, I think we really need to pay attention when we've got itinerant music happening, and itinerant specials just has to degrade the quality of the programming over time. So it's not panic mode, but I think that's an issue. Also, I think that Ann Heffron is a miracle worker, and I think they're amazing teachers at Marion. But I will say those half classrooms, that's generous to call them half classrooms. They're tiny. And for kids who need learning support, I can't imagine that those are sustainable and appropriate spaces for kids who sometimes just need a little space and time and a little distance from other children. So I hope you'll consider that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lauren Fenning. I'm a mom at Penwyn Elementary. My son is in 4th grade. I had a question about the extended day kindergarten program. Is that a pilot? Sorry, no. Is that a pilot program for full day kindergarten?
No. I can answer that. So EDK, Extended Day Kindergarten Program, I think the initial year was in 2013, if I recall correctly. But it is a program for certain children. It's in all 6 elementary schools, and it's for children who are experiencing some just need a little extra academic support. They've not met the benchmarks in reading and math, and they're like 7 to 9 students who are being provided with direct instruction from an extended day kindergarten teacher, and also with support from the reading math specialist and the speech therapist. So it's in all of the elementary schools. Yep. Well, no, every school has their own room. Every school, like Penwyn has an EDK program, Marion has an EDK program. So everyone has to have a dedicated space for the children to go, and the program starts from February till June.
Thank you. Mabel Haggerty?
I had one more question, I'm sorry. And then also the ED program at Marion. I'm a former ED teacher, so I know how difficult it can be to, now everybody, kids with emotional disabilities are coming in to Marion. But does it have to be at Marion? Is there a certain reason why it's at Marion?
It's been at Marion since long as I've been there, and that's since 1996, and I think it predates, my tenure at Marion. It's always been at Marion, so I can't really speak historically, but I know it's been there as long as I've been there.
I think I'd ask Mrs. Frazier our schools have a variety of programs at the elementary school.
They do. And so as for clarification, students who need a higher level of emotional support might need to go to Marion because we do have this support there. But there are itinerant level emotional support services provided in all of our elementary schools.
And you have a variety of other programs.
Correct.
Could you just quickly talk about?
Correct. We have autistic support classrooms in all of our buildings. Our specialized life skills program is at Penwyn. As Dr. Martino mentioned, our diagnostic K program is at Kinwood. So there are specialized classes across the district as well.
Mabel Haggerty, Jessica Pepler, and Catherine Grosh.
Hi, I'm Mabel Haggerty. I live in Penwyn, and I have a quick question as a follow-up to Mr. Ganan's comment about what would not work about putting an addition on at Marion. He said that there is still impervious space, but that traffic and parking would be probably the most significant challenge. I'm just wondering if that parking or that drop-off loop that is there could be extended through that green space along Bowman. I know you had mentioned that that was at one time thought about for parking, but the residents preferred to keep the parking on the street to slow down traffic, understandably. But if they were able to just extend that loop, would they be able to get a lot of that traffic that's backed up off of Bowman into that loop? So that's my first question. Another question from a parent that asked about schools that have both a cafeteria and an auditorium. Have there been any considerations about making seating, like in an auditorium, for example, movable so that it could be a flexible space to use for some of these needs. We have a cafetorium that serves both purposes, so we're just wondering if any consideration has been put towards merging those spaces in any way.
Mr. Gannon, has that come up? How about the extension of the?
That's certainly an idea. I don't think we've looked at that in detail. We certainly haven't discussed it with the township.
Just quickly, the auditorium at Marion is, it's on a slant. There aren't permanent seats, but it's I don't know how to describe it. It's tiered down, so it's not a flat. It's not a flat.
Okay.
It's not a flat surface.
Thank you.
Maybe I could provide a little more history here. I wasn't around when this happened, but in the mid-90s, when all the schools were renovated and expanded, there was a program developed in advance, and every school that did not have an auditorium was given a large group instruction space. And in some cases, then schools ended up with combination cafeteria, auditorium. Belmont Hills is an example, Penn Wynn's an example. Others, there's only one school ended up with the classic combination of gymnasium and auditorium, and that's Kenwood. So we were starting with an existing infrastructure that already had some auditoriums, and the program adapted from there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jessica?
Hi, my name is Jessica Pepler, and I'm a parent at Marion. My son is currently in first grade, and I have a daughter who will be starting in 2018. I have two questions. One is about projected enrollment. Is there any demographic data about how that breaks down between the different grade levels?
Yes, it is. I wouldn't. I mean, that shifts significantly.
So it's totally a moving target. So you don't know if you're going to end up with like a whole bunch of kids suddenly in the third grade, or if it's going to be sort of. I mean, do we have any ideas at all about that?
I think the demographers would indicate that when you graduate a class up, when you know what the third grade was and you know what going into fourth grade, you're pretty sure where you are. That doesn't stop. It doesn't take that many families to move in with fourth graders to throw it off.
Right.
That's really what I meant.
My next question is about building at Marion. And Mr. Gadan mentioned that the blacktop, the hardscape play area is a potential place for adding on classrooms or some kind of educational space. Is the idea that would be in the form of temporary classrooms? And then sort of a follow-up to that question is, if we put something there, some kind of instructional space, will there still be enough impervious space allotment left to then build another blacktop, like adjacent to the gym somehow, that we would have? Because on days when it's wet or if there's snow, like the only way that our kids get outside at all is on that blacktop.
One of the first things I learned when I got here was how important hard surface play area is to an elementary school principal. So I'm well aware of that, and I would think that if we were going to look at some sort of expansion plan, we would try to make up for any lost hard surface play area.
Would that, I mean, when you talk about potentially building on the current hard surface, are you talking about putting temporary classrooms there? Or are you talking about
I think that's an open question.
Okay, so that's something that's not on the table yet. I'd also just like to comment that I've only been at Marion almost 1 year now, and I have to say that I do feel that Ms. Heffron is a complete miracle worker as far as making sure that kids' needs are met. I have a kid who receives services, and it's amazing how creative the staff is and how much support they get from Ms. Heffron in terms of being allowed to exercise their creativity and exercise their authority to make the best choices so that kids can receive services in spaces that are crowded. Because I've heard from my son about some of the crowded spaces that are in the special education classrooms. And I'm putting that in quotes because they are really, really small rooms. Thank you. Thank you.
Wasn't aware that Mrs. Heffron had such an extended family.
My mother's coming in next, probably.
Hello, my name is Catherine Rowan Grosh, and I have a first grader at Marion, and then I have a kindergarten that's coming in the fall. Another fan of our dear principal here. And one of the things I was wondering about is if we were to build an additional classroom or whatever that space would hold, would that be with the idea that we could hold more students, or would that alleviate some of the pressure that the school currently holds? So with these, really small classrooms that we have, or the music teacher who's roaming around on a cart. So that's my first question.
I should hasten to add that the administration is not recommending, nor is the board deliberating necessarily on doing anything at Marion. The issue was we wanted to look at all of our buildings and talk about them as we talk about growth. And one of the things that I did a couple of times with the principals is say, if this were to happen, what would you do? So we're looking at some ifs and whats at each site.
Okay. And I'm not from Pennsylvania, so perhaps this is just different coming from California, but is there, what is the relationship between the school district and the township in terms of building approval? So for, I guess what I want to say is where I grew up, you had, basically the builders had to say, well, we can provide, like they weren't allowed to build without also offering enough room for green space and schools and that sort of thing. And I see we've got multi-use buildings popping up in various places, and our schools are not growing. Like, I see the seminary, who is, I guess, considered back and forth on selling some of its space, and I think, gee, perhaps a lovely site for a school. Okay, well, we can just ponder that. There may not be an answer. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what am I?
So you can start with the seminary.
The seminary. So right now we understand it's not for sale.
Okay.
And there are some challenges with that site as well as with the zoning. And there's a litigation that's going on right now. So that creates some issues for us. And the other question or comment was, impact fees. We did actually check with our land use attorney about impact fees. There is, I believe, a legislation that's pending that would support some impact fees for schools, but right now there's no way to do that, and that's my understanding. Okay.
All right.
I didn't come from California, but I know the feeling.
Sorry. Don't send me back. No, I mean, I love it there, but my family would miss me. The only other thing I was going to mention was we talked about the traffic on Bowman, and just from somebody who has driven on that road, and I have walked to pick up my child. My child normally takes the bus, and I have picked her up in the car. And it is really a pretty hairy situation to drive along. I have literally seen a bus have to pull up on the sidewalk. I don't believe there were children in it, luckily, but it was definite. There are sort of cars and buses going every which way, and this isn't to say that anything is being handled badly, or I don't know if that could be handled better, but I think definitely can't handle anything that would cause additional traffic. It's already, I think, at its limits. That's all. Thank you.
I just want to make one quick comment about building at Marion. Pat kind of downplayed it, but the challenge of if we do more work to that building, the amount of space that we're going to have to take to add parking to that site is probably going to be significant. I mean, the township did allow us to put some in reserve, but I think if we touch that site again, the likelihood of them allowing that again is not very high. And so I think the expectation is if we do anything to that building, it would also require an extensive amount of additional parking surface. So, that site disappears pretty quickly once that happens.
That's it.
One of the things I forgot was that the order in which the presenting is within the feeder pattern. So Kenwood, Marion, and now Penn Wynne.
Good evening. Just in terms of the space that we're currently using, over here we have our 4 modular classrooms currently being occupied by 3 of our kindergarten classroom teachers. One of those teachers teaches kindergarten in the morning, and in the afternoon she does challenged gifted support, so that's why that room there is split. This room here is the 4th room in the modulars. We use that for itinerant art and music. We've been able, last year our itinerant art and music was delivered on a cart in the classrooms. We've been able to I've been able to work very closely, and I'm very appreciative of the cooperation I get from my colleagues who I share the itinerant art and music teacher, to have them come to Penn Wynne when I have a space available, to have them have a dedicated space for art and music. What we have here is our instrumental music room. This used to be a closet that housed our cafeteria tables. Pat Gannan and his people went out and found a system whereby the cafeteria tables that we use every day literally disappear into the walls. You don't even see them when you walk in. You wouldn't even know that they were there. So this was a closet that we use for our cafeteria tables. Now our instrumental music is working in there. This was the second cafeteria table area that we had that's currently being used by our occupational therapists in order to provide services to our children. This is our office. In terms of space, it is adequate in terms of the amount of space we have. Programmatically, one of the downsides is that this used to be the main office here, and behind the main office, or next to the main office, I had my nurse. I had my 2 counselors, or 1.5 guidance counselors, my IST. These were all people that when my office was right here, I had instant access to. So when something was going on with a child and I needed them, I could get to them right away. If my nurse was having an issue and she needed me, she could get to me right away. Having it over here, my steps have gone up. I've gotten a few more steps on my Fitbit. But programmatically, I do miss having access to those people on that quick basis. We cluster our first grade classrooms along the first floor. Most of the first grade classrooms are all around the perimeter here. These 2 classrooms here are specialized learning support. These are self-contained classrooms for specialized students. We have K through 2 and then 3 through 5. Over here is one of my 2nd grade classes. Most of my 2nd grade is clustered up here, but unfortunately, when we get to the point where I need more rooms, I had to move a 2nd grade classroom down here and a 2nd grade classroom down here. Again, not ideal when the rest of the team is up here. This is our challenge room and our our regular music room that Mrs. Humes teaches in. This little red area here, that's EDK, so that's the program that was referenced previously. That's a room where when we have that program starting in February, we have 6 or 7 children who will stay for the afternoon and get their services and support there. Going up to my 2nd floor, this is my art room, and then we move into 5th grade. 5th grade is clustered along these classrooms here. This here used to be our large group instruction room, so this overlooked the cafetorium. And 2 years ago, Pat put a wall down the middle. We made this into 2 4th grade classrooms. This used to be the computer lab, which is now a 3rd grade classroom. Again, this is a singleton. The rest of the 3rd grade is up here. This is the one 3rd grade section that ends up over here by itself. Along here, I have my 4th grade classrooms as well. This is my library. And if I could just go back for 1 minute, this is a hallway on the 1st floor. On the second floor, what we had to do last year was to take that hallway and subdivide it into 3 spaces. So now this is a room that special education works in. This is where one of my speech therapists works in. This is a room where my FLES teachers have an office to put their materials. Moving along, this is ESL, speech therapist, one of my learning support classrooms, another learning support classroom, and then 2 more second grade classrooms up here. This is our cafetorium. So our cafetorium serves both as where we have lunch and where we also have our assemblies. So there is a limit in terms of timing. Our assemblies have to happen first thing in the morning or last thing in the afternoon. We have lunch starting at 11. We go straight through to 1:30. By the time our custodians have an opportunity to clean properly, it's 2 o'clock before we can schedule an assembly. If we do it in the morning, obviously they have to get it finished before lunches start. This space is also currently being used for some of my physical education classes, which also impacts the ability for us to have assemblies and so forth in there. This is my gymnasium. At this time, we have a number of our classes that are doubled up for gym. This is the one area that has been, when we talk about core spaces, has been a need for us. My PE teachers have been wonderfully flexible and creative in how they support the kids, but as it stands right now, we are doubling up several classes. Our 4 kindergarten classes are all doubled up, so everyone has PE in a double class. 4 of my first grade sections are doubled up in the gym, and then we have 6 classes which are currently being held in the cafetorium. They're scheduled first thing in the morning or again at the end of the day when we have that space available. As mentioned before, the large group room went away, it became 2 classrooms. The gymnasium space is not adequate at this time. Cafeteria and the library are adequate. Our itinerant art and music, they're sharing that modular space. So right now, they have a dedicated space. When Mr. Copeland came and I sat and met with him and he asked that what if question, well, this was one of the what ifs. If there was a need for a full-size classroom, this would have to go away. Those 2 teachers would need to go back on the cart and deliver their instruction in the classrooms. Special education spaces are adequate. GIFT, speech, ESL, and FLES, all of those are adequate. Again, our computer room went away. We don't have a dedicated computer space. And again, the administrative space itself is adequate, but its location is not ideal.
So once again, here's a slide that summarizes the enrollment history and the projections going forward. This indicates that the highest projected enrollment will happen in 2020-21 school year with 803 students. And that after that time, out through 27, the end of the projections, will average 795. So this, again, is one of the tables that we've used to calculate capacity. And so this actually is reflecting what is in the permanent building right now. And this reflects what's in our temporary classrooms. And the total is 34 classrooms for a total building optimum capacity, classroom capacity of 757. And if we compare that against next year's projected enrollment, we're a little bit short. Go out 2 more years, and we're still a little bit short on the numbers. One of the things to remember right here, as the principal pointed out, is that right now we have the luxury of 1 space in the temporary classrooms to use for supplemental art and music. And if we lose that space, and this calculation shows that space being accounted for a grade level classroom, that will put those programs back on a cart. Penn Win is one of the schools we've talked about adding on to, and we've looked at various options. Each of those options looked at adding 6 classrooms and an auxiliary gym. So this table shows what would happen if you had those extra permanent classrooms and the temporary classrooms went away. So we have a total of 36 classrooms here, and we come out with a optimum classroom capacity of 802. That actually gets us pretty darn close to our highest projected enrollment, and going beyond that, we have actually a little bit more available. But again, as I pointed out early, this capacity calculation doesn't tell the whole story. You've heard from the principal about programmatic changes. One of the things we've talked about in the options to add on is having additional PE space, and that would certainly address what he's told us about the lack of PE space. Moving on to look at the site. Again, here is a photo from overhead. Penguin actually occupies what you can consider an entire block. It has streets on all 4 sides. And the zoning analysis is shown here. This is our smallest elementary school property. It's 6.37 acres net. When I say net, that means we've subtracted out the part of the parcel that is occupied by township right-of-way for roads and sidewalks. It's in a combination R4, R5 district. We do have an allowable impervious surface of almost 50%. And right now we're under that, and we could in fact add an additional 10,715 square feet before we would hit that limit.
Thank you. Open it up for board questions now. Start at my left, Mr. Fetterman. Great, Ms. Ackman.
So the constraints around, do you consider the constraints around physical education to be the most urgent and maybe, you know, that seems pretty tricky. So how are the students dealing with it? And is that kind of, from your perspective, the highest priority to mitigate? Because
Sure.
we've heard lots of feedback from parents at this point, and so I can see how tricky it is.
So there's a couple different questions there. As far as the kids make it work. The kids are great. You know, I don't want to say, unfortunately, kindergarten thinks that that's their norm. So they walk in the door, and that's what they're accustomed to when they come in. So you know that's not. I don't hear from kids about that, to be honest. Physical education is the most challenging because it's one of those few content areas where they need space. You simply need a dedicated space, and it's not. We can be very creative in how we reconfigure a room. Pat can work miracles with his people to make closets into classrooms, literally. But you can't create a space for physical education that, you know, just isn't there. So it is, in terms of my concerns, the most pressing issue that we do have.
Sorry, and you feel like you have enough space right now to accommodate kids who need extra, you know, special help, no matter what it is?
We have been able to, much of what my teachers are doing, they're doing quite a bit of push and support. So they're trying to provide as many of their services and supports when they can and when appropriate in the regular education setting. So there are many teachers who are co-teaching, and based on that, their need for a pull-out space has been reduced somewhat.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bonaventura? Dr. Gilbert?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I have a question about art and music. So if we were to build the additional classrooms, is there space for art and music then to have classroom space, or is it still based on the assumption that they're going to be moving around?
Now, my understanding is that we would be able to take a space and dedicate it to art and music if there was an addition.
Okay,
Yes.
I wasn't sure from going through the slides, and I wasn't sure if I missed it. Thank you. Well, I would like to hear, I mean, I think that we've heard this for the other 2 schools, just to hear about your, I'm sure somebody else is going to ask it, but I'll go ahead around the drop-off and pick-up and the traffic.
Sure. So in the morning, our morning drop-off is established for parents and guardians on the Suffolk Avenue side of the building. Again, with the number of activities that go on before school, it's more of a staggered arrival, and it's not as much of a traffic concern. We make it clear during all of our orientations that AM drop-off and car line is for those kids who you can literally pull up, say, have a good day, and out the car they go. If you have a child that you know needs to get a few extra hugs in, or needs, you know, to make sure that their outfit's just right. We tell those parents and guardians, you got to find a parking space and walk them in. Car line keeps moving. In the afternoon, we have taken a number of measures in order to mitigate some of the problems that have been brought to our concern. One of the things that we have done is we've doubled up our car line. So we're literally doubling up the number of cars that we pull into our Suffolk Avenue side of the building in order to alleviate some of the backlog that was going back on Suffolk and sometimes spilling out onto Haverford Avenue. I talk about car line being a self-correcting system. When you make a mistake in car line, there's 5 or 6 people behind you that are going to tell you you made a mistake. Car line works when everyone cooperates. That is our mantra. If everyone sticks to the program, we're all right. It's horrible 15 minutes in the morning, it's a horrible 15, 20 minutes in the afternoon, and then it goes away. But it is something that we've worked really hard. Pat has been very helpful. We actually have videotaped just to give people visuals of what car line looks like in order to help people understand what it is they need to do so that they don't get that reprimand from the parent behind them.
I wanted to tag on to Ms. Agman's question around some of the specials. Again, thank you for the presentation, and I have witnessed car line firsthand, so I know we do police one another, which is a good thing, I think. I want to get a sense of the size of Penguin, obviously being very large in terms of elementary schools, and some of you, if you could share some additional challenges that you might find with the large number of children per grade level, getting to specials, having recess on the playground, et cetera. So if you could just kind of share some of the challenges and some of the things that you've done to mitigate those in the building.
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges, or one of of having a large school, is losing opportunities for teachers to have collaborative planning time. If you have 4 specials and there's 6 sections, then there's obviously 2 teachers who are going to be left out of that time, where teachers are able to come together as a group and plan for their kids and support their children. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. Again, I try to work very closely with some of my colleagues that I share staff with, so that on certain days I may line up 6 specials in a row so that my teachers can get 30 minutes together to talk about children and programming, curriculum, and so forth like that. In terms of the logistics, we really, the first couple days of school are challenging for us, and that's when we work out many of the bugs. We have become experts at traffic flow and figuring out what doors people should go out and come in. I always tell people, if you want to feel when it's the most busy, come at 11:50, because 4th grade's coming in, 1st grade's leaving, kindergarten's on the move. That's when the atrium feels like Grand Central Station. But you also will walk in there, and I've had people literally walk in the building and ask me, when are the children going to arrive? And I say, they're here. Because our teachers do a really good job of setting the expectations, setting the tone and the climate that it is a place of learning. And even if there are 752 of you, we still want this to be a quiet place where when people come in, they know that we have a mission that we're trying to accomplish.
Mrs. Pollard? Ms. Robinson? Mr. Driscoll?
I just want to comment. I mean, because some people may not know this, but where the red dot is parking in reserve. And I think it's just relevant for maybe those who don't know. The modules required extra parking, but rather than build the parking lot, the district signed a lease with to lease parking spaces from the BVM church about a half a block away, something like that. So kind of in the similar vein of what you just heard about Marion, finding parking in classrooms is kind of the trade-off you're finding on similar sites. So I just wanted to make a note, because some people may not know that those parking spaces next to Drayton are not there. It's only because we're lucky enough to have a lease with BVM that allowed us not to have to build those.
Yeah, I guess Robin asked my question, but I just wanted to sort of comment that we do think a lot about the culture of the schools and the school being big, and I think you spoke to that, but we don't talk about it a lot at the table because there's not a lot of data to talk about. But I just wanted to assure people that that is on our minds as we make these decisions. And then the question I have, I'm not sure if you're able to answer it, but Gladwin had approximately the same number of kids, but are they doubling up on gym class also? Okay, so I should wait until Gladwin's? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's my Gladwin question.
The other thing, Mr. Guinan, wanted me to just talk a little bit about bus dismissals. So in the morning, we have our buses line up. They come into our bus loop. We can get approximately 5 or 6 buses here into the loop. In the afternoon, we have 4 very dedicated staff who manage the dismissal of the children in the afternoon. What we do is we bring kindergarten, first and second grade down to our cafetorium, so they're already down when we start dismissal, and then 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students are called from their classrooms to report to the atrium and go right out onto their buses. So we load usually the first 6 buses. We're able to get them moving and out of the way so that the next 6 buses or so can pull in and get them loaded.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll open it up to public comment at this time.
Sydney Wong, Lauren Fenning, Natasha Davis, Kevin Wong, and Julie Williams. If you can just line up on the side here. You can go ahead.
My name is Sydney Wong, Penguin resident, and I just come back from the New York National Planning Conference, presenting to the planners not to use the demographic multipliers supplied by Robert Bushell. Calculated in 2006 using 1990 information based on the census PUMS data. My research team right now is updating the new generation of demographic multipliers. Therefore, my comments are a little bit technical. I don't know whether the consultants or demographers are here or not. I had a couple of interesting observations on the enrollment forecast, which I have certain professional differences. By the way, I was a planning professor at Penn, and I've conducting school enrollment and physical impact analysis for 15 years. As everybody almost know that enrollment increase and then stop and then decrease. The Montgomery Early Learning Center was an elementary school and was closed. And we are looking at some kind of increase at this moment. And then we did some kind of projection. The assumptions are very important. I'd like to point out, I know my time is not very much. There's not such a document called Who Live in Pennsylvania Housing. That is a Fannie Mae series performed in 2006. That is obvious and a mistake. Number 2, the statewide multiplier cannot be used, especially the PSAC, the public school age children, because that's a statewide public school participation rate. That means you're putting up all the municipalities in Pennsylvania, apply one ratio. And those ratios has to be done by 2 steps. SAC first, school age children, then the local public school participation rate. And state information are not adequate, so better use the PUMS data, go to some sort of PUMS aggregate to do it. Therefore, I will reserve the time for other commentators.
Thank you for your comment. Next, please.
Hi. My question, sorry, Lauren Fenning. I was up here earlier, Penguin mom. Thank you to the board member who mentioned culture. I appreciate that. I do think it is a big deal. In Penguin, we have, all schools have their concerns and their unique issues, without a doubt. But Penguin certainly is feeling, I think, the impact of inadequate indoor and outdoor space on traffic as well. That's a piece of it too that I know that they were talking about Bowman at Marion, but traffic is really difficult also on Haverford Road. And cars are going very, very fast. And right now you can turn on red into the crosswalk between Remington and Cross Hill from both ways. We have one crossing guard who has to handle going this way and going this way for our students. And as you know, one of our students was hit. and thank goodness she's okay, but she's really working hard, and it's a very convoluted process to try and get any kind of traffic improvement, and I don't know why, and I wish it wasn't so convoluted, because it's not that we want a turn above another school that has a traffic problem. That's not it at all. Bala Cynwyd, middle has obviously very serious problems that need to be taken care of, but anytime you would go there, there's no signage on the other end to Haverford coming in to the school. There's no like light or flashing light to tell you to slow down coming from that direction, and it is one woman who is doing all of it. She can't be in two places at the same time. And my last question was for Mr. B, which is, do you think currently, as the school is right now, that we have adequate outdoor space?
In terms of the space that we have outside right now, again, it's what everybody has been accustomed to, so I don't know how I gauge whether or not it's adequate or not. If, I know that our kids have plenty of opportunities. When we have full use of our fields, we will have soccer, we will have kickball, we will have wall ball and blacktop activities along with the wood chips, so I'm not sure how to specifically answer that question, Ms. Fenning.
One of the things that Mr. Gannon is going to do at the end is take a look at all of the relative space, course space and so forth and so on. One of the things that would have worked, I think, at that particular incident that Mrs. Fenning was talking about is if there was a pedestrian signal on Remington. If there was a pedestrian signal, that would have given a few seconds. In other words, the pedestrian gets to walk before the signal turns green. And we think that would have been a help. And I know, you've raised it with, did you raise it with the township and so forth?
Yeah. Okay. And we've talked about the traffic and safety issues extensively at the intergovernmental meeting with the township representatives as well as Narberth Borough Council, and we share all of those concerns. I mean, obviously, our student safety is our first priority, and so we'll continue to look at, I know the township has some sidewalk grants, and we've talked to Commissioner Churchill around what are things that we can do collaboratively that are within the domain of the school district as well as the township, and then some of them are state issues, PennDOT issues, given that Haverford Road is a state road. So there are a number of factors, but they're certainly on the radar of the Board of School Directors for sure.
My name is Natasha Davis, and I'm a Penguin parent. And I just had a few notes, and some of them are filtered through a 6-year-old. But some of the things that you don't see in these slides are limitations on the hard surface play. There's a lot of conflicting stories about, like, can you run, can you not run? So when they have recess, like, a lot of times they are understanding that they're not allowed to run around because there are too many kids out there that they can even enjoy a normal recess. I would also say that even though we've got a whole school block here, we don't have sidewalks. We're doing better on sidewalks or even crossing guards at each of those corners, and that causes traffic issues, which I know we're been discussing a lot. And also on the slides of the first floor and the second floor, when they converted those atrium offices, when they converted that large group room, we're talking about, like, kids are in classrooms all day that don't have a window to the outside. So, and the last thing I want to say is that we are the largest elementary school, and I know that everybody's very fond of these lines that are drawn on these charts as if they've always been there, but, and I feel like we're sort of being told, well, this is a Penguin, we're growing the most. So it's this Penguin problem. It's a Penguin problem. And that just hurts because I look at this, and in our catchment area is the former school that was sold. And I know we can't go back, but it was sold. And those kids are now going to Penguin. So of course, when a whole population bubble is happening, it is stressing our school more because there used to be a whole nother school that those kids would have fed to. And so I believe this is a school district problem And if it requires redistricting, our neighbors in Haverford have done it, then that may be what has to happen. So it's not a Penn Win problem. It is a district problem. And if Mr. B wants to correct any of my statements about hard surface play, sure. I'm happy for you to.
I wouldn't correct. I would clarify, though. When we are on blacktop only, those times when the fields are not playable or usable, or when there is snow and ice and so forth, our rule is you can't run. When we have 120 first graders, second graders, fifth graders, whatever it is, on our blacktop, it is not safe for them to run, so that is our rule, and that is accurate. When everything is open, you can run anywhere you want, as long as you're outside.
Hello, my name is Kevin Wong. I used to be a Penn Win student, and I went to Harriton until about 2 years ago. So I can see our former principal right there. Anyway, coming back from the era back when we could run on the blacktops, I am simply amazed by how much the size of the school has increased. I mean, I think back when I was there, it was something around 450 something students, and this leads to, I think, two major issues. The first one, I think, is about traffic, and the second one is more on the side of food. Because even when there were 400-something students, I can't really fathom how the school administration is able to get all of them in and feed them and get all of them out again. Because I remember back when I was there, in the age when we could run, the traffic issues were already significant, and the food lines were already at such a point where if you were late to the food, then you're not really getting any. So, I mean, at that point, why is it impossible for us to build, to do two things? One is to move lines, which is a lot cheaper than building new buildings, I think. Moving lines costs a lot less money than finding large amounts of concrete, steel, glass, etc., and then hiring architects. And the other one is that if there are traffic issues at other places, for example, Marion, which has a street that's currently not really being used, which is apparently the impression that I've gotten there. And if there is an issue when it comes to impervious areas, I'm somewhat unclear, of course, then again, I don't really know much about zoning law, about why it is impossible to build, for example, using gravel or other things that are not impervious, so that water can still percolate through. And this would lead to some kind of issues that would resolve some of the issues when it comes to zoning laws, or why we can't just change the zoning requirements because, I don't know, telling the township that there are more people seems somewhat reasonable there. But the other thing is about reduction in playground space. I think that such a reduction would lead to some kinds of problems. For example, I certainly think that my best friend in all of history that I met at Penn Win, we met on the playground right over there, between the gravel space, which is on the the wood chip space on the south left. It is south, whatever, it's the bottom left. But anyway, I would say there's some kind of social life benefits on the fact of having large amounts of space, along with the fact that the expansion of that, the reduction of that would lead to significant problems. I'm also unclear about how all of these fields can be used compared to how they were about a decade ago, when it comes to the fact that the kickball area, which used to have a home plate, is now a shed, and third base is now modular areas. I'm somewhat unclear about how we can also fulfill our obligations to the community at large, given that the Little League can also use this space when there just isn't any and is now no longer a thing. Thank you.
Julie Williams, Karen Smith, David Park, Azzy Gara, Vicki Doherty, and Laura Harbar.
Hi, I'm Julie Williams. I am a mother at Penn Win. I just wanted to point out the idea that this is the smallest property in the district and the largest school. I'd also like to point out that the green area that you see between the school building and Haverford is unusable. It is on a hill, and I think there are also some historic requirements in regards to the front of the school building. Children do not play in the front. They are not allowed. It is unsafe. Haverford is a very busy road. I'm sure every single one of you have driven on this road. So you need to cut that away from your calculations as well, okay? Next, let's talk about the space that our kids do have to play. Pretty much all winter, they are on blacktop only. We live in Pennsylvania, okay? It is wet, it is snowy, it is icy. They are on blacktop only. As Mr. B said, the class sizes, the grade sizes are so large that the kids cannot run because they would hurt each other. This school is continuing to grow, and if we continue to allow it to grow unchecked without putting in a different plan for moving some students or building another school, will students even be able to run on the green space or the playground? We will have less green space, we will have a smaller playground, we will have more students. They already can't run on the blacktop. This is not acceptable for children who are 6 to 11 years old. We know the science. We've seen it. This is a very good school district. This is why we all care, right? We work really hard, and you guys work really hard for our kids. Kids need to play, and they need to run for their brain development. We are hurting our children if we don't give them these opportunities. I'd also like to talk about the safety issues. I lately have been picking up and dropping off my daughter because she broke her wrist. And so I don't make her take the bus. Okay. When you drive out of the school at pickup time, everybody has to turn left on Suffolk Road. So you're going this way on the diagram. Kids are walking. Suffolk Road has a sidewalk, but as soon as you turn right, which all the cars also have to do, they turn right onto Trent, there are no more sidewalks. There are kids walking, sometimes on the grass, or when it's snowy or icy or rainy, like much of the time, they're in the street. And you have so many cars. There are so many cars. It is so dangerous. You also have people turning left from Remington onto Haverford, trying to go as fast as they can because they're late for work. And they're skipping the lights, and we talked about there's one crossing guard for 4 corners. Maybe we can get another crossing guard in the meantime. I don't know if the school district controls that. But at least, because you see her, she's like, she would pretty much have to run to cover everybody. Anyway, it's really dangerous, and if the school continues to grow, these dangers and problems are only going to increase. So I hope you'll consider building another school. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Smith. I'm a Penguin parent as well. I guess a couple of things. When you talked about the sheer volume, I guess I'm curious about the fire life safety for our children and the fact that there's so many internal classrooms. So should something go wrong, how would we get all those children? So you're talking upwards of probably 900 people when you talk about teachers and staff. So I would figure that would probably be a pretty large task. And then where are you going to put them all once you have to get them all outside? Not so sure what the adequate space is for that either. So just want to make sure we're considering that when we're looking at these things. Also, Mr. B, you talked about having adequate, and we've adjusted to the space we have from a green space. Can you elaborate? And I know that no plans have been finalized at this point in time, but if we're adequate with respects to how we've lived life, if that's how we're going to kind of put our mindset to what we deserve, then what do we look like once expansion occurs? And we've already had this new normal of smallness. What then occurs and what becomes our new normal?
Particularly the fire, the emergency exit issue.
Sure. So monthly we do fire drills and lockdown drills. That's something that we're required to do by state. We have plans for every space in the room where they will exit. They also have plans for when we do a lockdown drill where people go in order to shelter in place. Part of what we will do in terms of the fire drills, after the first couple where we have gone through the process, we will eliminate exits. We'll take exits out of commission, so to speak. Literally, I will stand at the end of a hallway with a sign that says, "Fire, now what?" And my expectation is that my faculty and staff are able to respond to that on the spot. I can tell you that during our fire drills, I have asked entire classes to stay in the school so that we can check our system of checks and balances. We have a system where there are at least 2 adults that are checking on every classroom to make sure that every classroom and every kid is accounted for. So I will ask for classrooms to stay in to make sure that the system is working and that someone is noticing that a class is missing. I will ask for specific people to stay in the building. I have actually taken children out of line quietly at the end of the line in order to see whether or not the teacher that is responsible for that child has accounted for that child. In every instance, they have caught what I have done. So the safety of the kids is my utmost concern. And we work very hard at Penn Win in order to make sure that our kids stay safe.
Hi, I'm David Bark. I live across the street from the Penn Win Elementary School. First off, I have a question because I noticed that the allowable impervious surface is different on our school than it was for Marion, so I'm kind of curious what factors into those and why they're actually different, and is there some district standard, especially with elementary schools and people talking about play space? Another question I've had for a while is it seems that there were once windows in the front facade of the original building on the lower level. Is there actually a basement in this building?
There are several basement areas. There is, it depends on how you define a basement, because we have the boiler room, there are many levels down there. There is no usable space for any type of instructional space, if that's the question.
I would say it's all utility-related space. There's not much of it. Most of it's crawl space.
Okay. I appreciate what people were saying about the traffic flow being self-correcting, and usually people must do what they're supposed to do because it runs in and out without my really noticing that it's happened in the morning or afternoon. But I can certainly hear it when it doesn't, and would somewhat encourage parents to find another way to self-correct, because we neighbors would appreciate it. And as for parking, even though there is contracting for additional parking, I can tell you that some of my neighbors have taken to actually having to park in the alley. So we can't get through our alley at certain points in time because they have left at some point during the middle of the day and then can't park on the street when they get back. And I would, also second what some other people have said, that redistricting is not a bad word. I come from another school district in Ohio, in Cincinnati, which was wildly popular and, always experienced growth. And the parents just basically adjusted over time that this is normal, that, every year, every couple years, the lines are going to shift and your kids will go to a different school. And people have adjusted. So it's not common here. And I understand that's why people, get upset about it. But once it becomes the new normal, it's not such a big deal. Thanks.
Azigara, Vicky Doherty, then Laura.
Before the next speaker, Mr. Gannon, could you address the zoning issue and the impervious surface?
Right. The zoning at Marion, my understanding, again, I'm no expert either, but it's all R4. At Penn Win, we have a combination of R4 and R5. R5 allows more impervious surface. Back when the school was renovated and expanded in 1998, the Zoning Hearing Board made a decision as to how much impervious would be allowed on the entire site, and that's where that number comes from.
My name is Azigara. I live in Penn Win. I want to say three things. First, I was happy to learn that the administration is thinking about the solution for the intersection of Haverford and Remington, and have been talking to, the board has been talking to the commissioners about fixing or improving the crosslight system there. Second, I think there was some misjustice done to Mr. B about the fire hazard. I don't think the question was about how capable the school is in actually executing the plan. The question was more about When the school grows to 800 students, and we have over 100 faculty and staff, and we have a third of the field taken by, or some space taken by the addition, where are all of them going to go? That was the question. And the third thing that I want to say is this. It seems to me that, at least with regards to Penguin, but actually since I've heard about Kinwood and Marion, it might be for the whole eastern section of the township, it may be for the whole township. We need to maybe think a little differently. The fact that the impervious allowance is allowing to increase Penguin doesn't mean that we need to do it. It also doesn't mean that we need to do it in Marion and we need to do it in Kinwood. When you have the smallest footprint and already the biggest school, increasing the size of that school seems to be unreasonable. There might be another solution. And I heard Mr. Ganan use the technical term, I think he used optimal size. This is not optimal size. The optimal size of Penguin is less than 550, not 803. So maybe the solution is actually not doing the patchwork that we've been considering, increasing a little bit here and a little bit there, and who's going to get the brunt of it. Maybe the solution should come from a completely different direction. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Vicki Doherty. I have a 10th grader at LM and a 7th grader at BC and a 1st grader at Penguin. I'm also a Penguin alum, but and BC and LM. But I raised the 10th grader and the 1st grader because I see the difference in terms of culture already. When my 10th grader was in his early years at Penguin, we were, I believe, less than 550. I'm sure we were close to 500. And just at like school-wide events, I mean, even if you build additional classrooms, you build an additional gym, when you have like school-wide events, back to school night, when you have school-wide social events like the international night, it is such a different feel in that building, trying to get all those people in. Even grade-wide events, like we had the 1st grade play a couple of months ago, and I think in the letter home, I could be wrong about this, but I think it said it was encouraging siblings who attend Penguin to not come at night because you just can't fit everybody in the room. So I think there's real like physical size issues beyond just classroom numbers, gym, course space. It's just, it is about culture and certainly the physical space outside too. The other thing I wanted to comment on, the reason I decided to comment, is about the gym issue. And the question about whether kids feel the difference. So my 1st grader, who's a very physically active kid, but is shy, hates gym. It's the only class at Penguin that she has complained about. And it's because she has gym with 45 kids. Who wants to be in a gym class with 45 kids when you're a shy 6-year-old? So I just think it's a shame that it's the only class she doesn't like is gym. My boys love gym more than anything. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Laura Rebar. I'm the parent of a 10th grader, my stepdaughter, a 2nd grader, and a kindergartner at Penguin Elementary. And being the last speaker, I have a few comments that are very similar to the last ones. The culture from back when my stepdaughter it was just over 500, I believe, when she started there. And now by the time my kindergartner will be leaving there, will be or 800, it seems like. It's just at the community events, so forth, it's overwhelming the amount of kids and parents and families. My kindergartner is in the temporary classrooms now, and the space, she is a wonderful teacher. We are very happy with all of the accommodations and so forth that have been made, but I go in to help out in the classroom, and there's a lot of redirecting that needs to happen because the kids are really on top of one another. It's a very small space. Parents aren't allowed to go for parties anymore, for the Valentine's party or whatever, because there's not enough space for the parents. So things of that. And again, the green space, smallest property for the largest population, just doesn't really make sense. And yes, there's zoning laws and so forth, but is that really equity for the kids? Yeah. And I didn't know, the gym, are there 2 gym teachers then when there's 2 classes? Okay. We've had a few injuries this year, so for my kindergartner, running into people, so I never, things happen, of course. Thank you very much.
Shelby Sparrow and Tanya Schreiber.
Hi, I'm Shelby Sparrow. I have a 3rd grader and a 5th grader at Penn. My question is, if there, in the discussion of the addition on Penn, classrooms and gym space, that if the school reaches 800 or so students, in terms of art and music specials, I don't know how, I can't do the math on how many sections per grade roughly that would be, but it seems to me that there might need to actually be 2 art rooms and 2 music rooms, or more than, because there can't be enough time in the day, sections in the day, to accommodate. So does those classroom additions, do they only cover the new students that would be coming in, the actual enrollment, or does that allow for an extra art room or an extra art and music room kind of to be shared? Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm... And then in terms of, because there is the extra gym space, and then also the cafeteria, the cafetorium space, if the school expands to over 800, is the cafetorium large enough to accommodate each grade that would need to eat their lunch in there?
I think I'll let Mr. B, or first of all, Pat, my recollection is the 4 classrooms would, sorry, did you? Oh, sorry, no. 4 classrooms were for expansion, and then the other 2, if there were 6, would be to recoup some extra core space, as I recall.
That's correct. It would all depend on what the actual enrollment was year to year, whether there's a free room available or half a room or whatever.
And then in terms of the cafeteria, Pat, we recently just looked at the square footage and so forth of the cafeteria, and Pat determined that there is actually space for additional, if we needed to, we could add additional tables. The one area that we would need to do some improvements would be with the serving line in order to kind of pick up the pace in terms of moving kids through the serving line. But the space itself, is my understanding, was adequate. I don't know if Pat wants to comment.
He was going to talk about the space towards the end anyway, yeah. Okay.
We did look at the idea of adding additional tables similar to what's already in there, and we believe there is space to do that.
Hi, this is Tanya Schreiber from Penn. And a couple years ago, we came to these meetings and we were talking about the need for the trailers, and we were told that we were going to get the trailers so that we could have art and music back in classrooms. And lo and behold, now most of them are filled with students. So I'm not sure how we can be confident that when this carrot is held, that if we handle one more expansion, I think that would be the 4th one, because we've got the original school, we've got the 2nd expansion, then we've got everything from the front door to the left is the 3rd expansion, and each one with the promise that it'll make the school more comfortable for the students, only to add more students with a shrug of the shoulders. If this building was built today, it would need over 100 parking spots, which is about half of what we have. The entire community, within walking distance of the school, I think on the 2-block perimeter, there's only 108 street spots. And so the idea that a parent would have to pull over and find a spot, it doesn't make any sense. Now, I came last Monday night and I asked if we were comfortable with the fact that there were 761 children expected in the fall, and that May 1st was the date that someone had, June 1st is the date they have to enroll by the partner program. Oh, by the way, that was the other promise, was if we had the trailer, I asked if we would have kids partner school to us. No, that wouldn't happen because we were over capacity. It already happened this year. But when we talk about this, the fact that you were comfortable, you said, Mr. Copeland, you said you were comfortable with the number of children, sir, the number of children that were going to be here as of May 1st. You said you were confident. Dr. Van Lynch asked me to hold my question for tonight. I emailed you, I used the Right to Know system, and I asked for the data because I want to understand if we're expecting 761 kids and you're saying you're comfortable that based on the numbers you have right now, that all those kids can fit in the next 4 months, What's your plan to fit the 761 kids into this building in the next 4 months?
Questions?
My
Okay.
question is, how many kids do you currently
So,
have
let me go-
enrolled in the school?
let me go
and what are
back-
you going to do if we get to 761 by the fall, as the demographers say we will?
Let me go back to the beginning. You talked about art and music. Mr. B, my understanding was that the modulars are holding itinerant art and music. Is that correct?
That's correct. So with the modular classrooms, there are 3 classrooms that are kindergarten. 1 is used for kindergarten and challenge in the afternoon. The 4th room is dedicated at this time to itinerant art and music.
So what we've done is, because we've partner schooled, when we partner schooled last year, we partner schooled with a June 1st beginning to a July 1st. We moved that up so that it's May 1st to June. And what I said last week was, from what we've got so far, we've got, and you responded to this afternoon, I think it's 700 and, is that not correct? Was it Mrs. Schreiber responded to? I think there was an email. Okay, it was 700. Okay, well, 751 students.
757 total. 6 are still in the queue that have till June 1st to finish their paperwork.
And so with that, there are no classes at this point that are over the N+1. In terms of partner schooling to Penn Win, was that a special needs situation? Yeah, so that was because of a special needs class.
So next year they should expect 757 children in the school in the fall?
Right now, partner schooling is a process that determines class size, not total enrollment.
Ben Meyer.
I'm Ben Meyer from Penn Win. I'll be very brief. I'm very interested in this presentation as well as the other elementary schools. Just briefly, I'm from Penn Win and the Penn Win Civic Association. And just wanted to say thank you to Pat and Damien, Ben Driscoll and Mr. B for considering some of these alternatives that we've presented and you've worked on to help improve them. And also, I think part of this discussion might have been from Penn Win asking questions as well about what's equitable as far as core spaces internally and externally. So I think it's edifying for the community as well as the board to hear about it. I think our next study for us, what the question I'm asking myself, and I think we'll do and maybe you might want to consider, because people really are being pretty squished in all the schools, is for every $1 that's invested in a capital project, how much does that increase the property value overall in Lower Merion? So if just for a round number, if you invested $100 million in a combined elementary school and middle school, which would be, I mean, land is tough to find, but if hypothetically, if you could find that, you could replicate BC and Kenwood, that would solve the problem. Would that increase the property value by $100 million in the district overall? In which case, some of the residents who do object to taxes might say, well, my house is going up by that much. Maybe it's I'm fine with it if in fact it increases that. So again, I appreciate you thinking specifically about Penn Win, but also think about the legacy of, do we really want to, as a community, squeeze all of our kids into be the world's most efficient people at putting people into schools, and rather than maybe continuing to look into the other property and swinging a little bigger for the fences. Thank you.
Belmont Hills. Dr. Hart was not able to be here this evening, so pinch hitting will be Jennifer Keogh, who is the assistant principal. While she's getting set, The question was asked, does Gladwin double up in gym? And the answer I got was a nod from the principal. Just in case.
That's it.
Hmm?
Penn Valley doubles up as well?
I believe Penn Valley does too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening. As we take a walk through Belmont Hills, we'll start on the lower level. We have our cafeteria. It's our cafetorium. So we have our auditorium and our cafeteria. We have to be careful when we schedule our assemblies. The assemblies are scheduled before or after lunch periods. Beside the cafetorium, we have our gymnasium. Down this hallway, we have, if we start at the end, we have our instrumental music room. This was at one time a reading support classroom that was just this year changed into the instrumental music. Beside the instrumental music, we have two speech and language classrooms. We have a learning support classroom. Down the back hallway, we have our 4 third-grade classrooms and our gifted education classroom on the end. As we transition up to the main level, let me just find my point where we are here. On the back hallway, we have our 5 second-grade classrooms. We have 2 special education classrooms. They're specialized autistic support classrooms across the district. We have sorry, can I blow this up at all?
Pardon?
Sorry, I just need to blow it up a little bit. Can I blow it up on my
I don't
screen?
think we can.
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
We have the 3 first-grade classrooms, and we have our large LGI classroom that had to be transitioned into a first-grade classroom this year, so we lost that LGI space. We have 2 kindergarten classrooms. We have our office space. We have our nurses suite. And then we have our, let's see here. Sorry, we have our reading support classroom. We have our music space. We have our art space. We have our math specialist, reading support, and 2 additional autistic support spaces and a learning support space. The computer lab was lost last year and turned into an autistic support room. As you transition upstairs, we have 3 fifth-grade classrooms and 4 fourth-grade classrooms. We have a reading support for our intermediate grades and a learning support classroom for grades 4 and 5. Over the last year and this year, we lost our computer lab that was converted into an autistic support classroom. Downstairs on the main level, the speech room was transitioned into an autistic support classroom for grades K through 2. Upstairs, the classroom, there was a classroom that was converted into a learning support classroom for grades 4 and 5. This year, due to the increase in kindergarten sections, there were 4 sections, we had to relocate our EDK program into an alternative location due to an increased section. The LGI room was lost because it was converted into a first-grade classroom. Our instrumental music, then due to that domino effect, was moved to the bottom level where there was that extra reading room. That's where the instrumental music room was. And then there's a few office spaces where our itinerant specialists share space the instructional support teacher, the behavior specialist, the speech therapists each have their own space downstairs on the bottom level. Our itinerant music and the ESL teacher share an office space. Right now, our core spaces that were lost were the LGI room that was converted to a classroom. The cafetorium, gymnasium, library, and art are at adequate space. The EDK program, due to that increased section, had to be relocated, and each year that will have to be reevaluated. There is a classroom for the gifted education, speech and language. The ESL program, FLES is on a cart that transitions into each classroom. The school psychologist has an office, so there is adequate space. There is no computer lab at this time. Computers are in the classroom or they're borrowed and checked out. The administrative space is adequate.
You know, one of the things that occurred to me when we were talking about Penn Win that I forgot to mention, I know that when we converted some space at Belmont Hills last year, I think it was Dr. O'Leary who asked me about internal classrooms that were windowless. There were some at Penn Win, there were some at Belmont Hills, correct?
Yes.
And I'm not sure if, I don't think, are there any in Kinwood? There are. And Marion has some. So that's, I remember looking into it when you asked the question, and you just triggered my recollection.
Okay.
It's Mr. Gannon. Keep move, Mr. Gannon.
Again, here's a summary of our enrollment history and the enrollment projections. Our highest projected enrollment is way out in 2024-25 with the number of 494. And after that, it would average about 498. So you can see that these numbers don't vary by a whole lot. 494 happens to be the highest projected enrollment. Again, if we take a look at a table like this, we can compute the optimum classroom capacity for the building, shown here, 491 students, and you compare that against the highest projected enrollment. Small deficit at highest projected enrollment and slight availability thereafter. However, as I pointed out earlier, the numbers don't tell the whole story. You have heard the rest of the story from our assistant principal about programmatic changes that have taken place because of enrollment growth. Here's a picture of the school from the air, and I'd like to point out that this is more or less a drive-through here. The property extends all the way back into this wooded area, but most of this area back here is wooded and hilly, and even though it's technically part of the school, it's not used by the school or usable by the school. And so I've just indicated that things outside this fence line here are part of the property, but they're not able to be used by the school. However, I do show the parcel size here, the zoning district. There is quite a bit of impervious surface that would remain here. A lot of that has to do with the fact that all this property is here, even though we can't necessarily use it. Would you like to talk about pickup and drop-off?
Right now, the school buses come in Schoolhouse Lane and circle through to the main entrance of the school. That is separate from car drop-off and parent pickup.
So that's located right here.
And there are two separate entrances and exits for those locations. So they're pretty separate and they work smoothly. We have 3 staff total, 2 for the bus and then 1 at Carline and Walkers.
The school does have a small parking lot all the way down here in the rear for staff, and it does show some reserve parking that was designated during the last land development approval in the late 1990s. And are there any questions we could answer?
Okay, which way did I start last time? I'll start with Dr. O'Leary.
All right. I just wanted to comment on some of the previous speakers. There were comments about sidewalks, and I just wanted to clarify that any student that's not provided a bus has a safe walking route, and we're not telling students to walk unsafely through streets without sidewalks, and that we're actively working with the commissioners and with the communities to put in sidewalks. There was also comments about building another school, and we look at that. We look at it all the time. If there were property that were workable, you would see drawings, but we have not found such a property that's zoned correctly, that's big enough, that's, everything that we need. So it's not that, again, we don't talk about these things because there really isn't very much to talk about. We can't control what comes up for sale, we can't control what's big enough, and we have a community that's largely built out, so we really struggle with these things. And now I'll get to my question. Running at recess when only the hard areas are open, are the other schools running at recess, or is that uniquely a Penn Win phenomenon that you can't run at recess when the ground is wet?
Whenever it's blacktop only, depending on what the weather is outside, would depend on if the child can run. If there are puddles on the blacktop, we would look at the safety, and then that would be looked at. But typically, children can run on the blacktop area if they're on blacktop and the grass fields.
Ms. Robinson? Ms. Pollard? Okay, I don't have anything either. Thank you for the presentation. Dr. Gilbert?
I do have a question, although that's actually the school that my children attended, so I'm pretty familiar with it. But I just want to go back to the autistic support program, because that's, a program that is, particular to Belmont Hills. So we've heard from other schools in Marion that the rooms where the emotional support students are smaller than regular classrooms. Is that the case at Belmont Hills? Because I don't remember that, but it's been a couple of years. So I'm just wondering, what are the rooms like?
There are 4 autistic support classrooms in the building. 2 are strictly for Belmont Hills students, and 2 are district-wide. Those 2 that are district-wide carry about a caseload of 8 in each classroom, and there are students from all across the district. We have looked at increasing the availability to restrooms closer to those classrooms, but they are unique and they're very specialized, and those students are included in the general education classroom and then also go to their resource room.
Are those generally regular size classrooms? I guess with 8 students, they might be smaller, but are you concerned about the size of those classrooms?
The 2 classrooms that are the autistic support classrooms for district-wide, no, the spaces are adequate right now, and we're looking at it, adding a restroom into one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Thank you.
Sorry. Ms. Devon-Ventura? Ms. Ackman?
It's my assumption that Belmont Hills maybe has a higher proportion of students that take the bus than other schools. How many kids walk versus take the bus to Belmont Hills, and how does that impact congestion or otherwise?
There are more students that are walkers and go through parent pickup. There are right now 7 buses that circle through. I don't know the percentage.
Okay.
I will say, though, just as having been at the school, that as in all the other schools for example, when you're having a full school activity, the parents are parking way into the into the neighborhood, and that also as you're leaving, it tends to back up all the way to down the hill. I should remember the name of that street, and I can't. But it's so there, because there's not a lot of ways to get in there.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Fetterman, anything?
No, thanks for the presentation.
Okay.
Great school. My kids went there. I have fond memories of it.
Great. Any other questions from the board? Okay, so we'll start with public comment. Thank you again.
Andrea Tickle. Is there anyone else that would like to sign in? Please do so now. Thank you. Andrea Tickle? Nope. Okay, Julie, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Julie Williams from Penn Win again. I just had a question about the comment about building another school. So I remember at one of the first meetings I came to after I moved here, there was something about the school district owns some land that's not really used, and I think it's up like somewhere in the more in the Gladwin area. Is that true, or did I misunderstand something?
There's a piece of property adjacent to Welsh Valley Middle School. The district has looked at a lot of different options there. Part of the challenge, if it's going to be another elementary school, is in order for it to relieve enrollment, and I suppose it's still something that we could look at. First of all, it's a small site, so it only holds about 550 students. So it's a relatively small site. The initial look was to have it used as a kindergarten center, so you wouldn't have quite as much land around it. If you made it an elementary school, I think you're challenged with any kind of land around it. And then in order to get students where you're relieving students from around it, you would have to, for example, move students from Penn, it's called cascading. You would move students from Penn Win, for example, into Marion, and then move students out of Marion into the new school. And you'd have to do that around there to be able to get kids there.
Yeah,
it's a challenge, but.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want, about the, I do understand it requires cascading, redrawing of the lines. I would just say it's not really redistricting, right? We all live in the same district, and we all have great schools. So recently I was in the DC public schools, which is not such a great district, and they actually redistricted kids from good schools into bad schools, right? That's a very tough decision. That is very difficult. But here, you know, you're taking kids from one good school into another. So I'd just like to say maybe it would be a good option. It would relieve middle school pressures. It would relieve pressures around the elementary schools. So thank you for considering that.
All right, anybody else?
Can I just ask Bob to clarify his answer for a second? When you said 550, was that the number of kindergartners that could fit in there, or the number of full-day students?
That was the kindergarten number.
That was only kindergarten center.
Yeah.
I recall that was the full elementary school number.
Full elementary school number. The problem was, though, when it was originally designed as a kindergarten center, it had limited core space.
Correct.
I thought that the issue around kindergarten, because we're still looking at the kindergarten center, was how many kindergartners could fit in there as well, and how many that would then, could you fit the kindergarten from every school?
Well, as long as it remained half-day kindergarten.
Well, right.
Any additional questions? All right. Gladwin?
Gladwin.
Let me just pull this up for you. There you go.
Good evening, board, administration, and community. Let's take a look at Gladwin. All right, so this is the ground floor plan, and we have kindergarten, 2 classes over here, with a 3rd class over here, which is used for, that was opened for the 5th section of kindergarten, as well as the EDK in the afternoon. We have 6 first grade classrooms over here. We have the art room here. We have the music room here. We have, right here, this is actually the stage of the auditorium. And that's where our music instruction with instrumental and everything takes place. Sometimes, though, however, it does spill out into the lobby, depending on the use of the auditorium. The cafeteria, the max seating is 148. It was a little bit of a challenge this year with our 5th grade class, which was 146. This right here is the only common area for the faculty where they have lunch. This is the administration offices, the main office for the building. The classes here, we have a K-1-2 learning support class. We have our 2 classes for autistic support right here. Room 100 here, this is for like OT, PT, behavior in that room. Let's see. We'll go down to this hallway. This is the 3rd grade wing here. In here, when I came in July, this wall was being built in order to make 2 classrooms, but they would each have their own space, their own doorway in. And that has 3rd grade students in there and some 4th grade students. Right next door, you can see that it's 3 colors. They are not walls. That's just showing you that there is the itinerant art, the itinerant music, and also gifted is all within that space. And that's just having fun with the schedule and making sure nobody's in there at the same time. We have, okay, we're going to go back down to this hallway. This is another gifted support area, and then this turquoise area here is where FLES teachers basically have their desks and their belongings because they push into all the classrooms. And this is also ESL, so some students do come in here for their support. Over here is the 2nd grade classrooms. There is 1 5th grade classroom here. I was told that about in 2010, this used to be the computer lab. It was changed into a 2nd grade classroom, and then it's now currently a 5th grade classroom. Down here is the library, and I know in an earlier, a question was had about STEM. We too have cleaned out, did a little bit of house cleaning with the library closet to make sure that we had room for our B-bots and O-bots and maker space and everything for this area. Okay, 2nd floor, this is it. We have 4th and 5th grade up here on the 2nd floor. We have 1 classroom here for special education. Important to keep 4th and 5th grade learning support with their peers. So we share this classroom with 4th and 5th grade. And again, just having fun with the schedule, make sure that they are not in there at the same time. So if, 1 teacher is pushing in, another teacher may be pulling out for support. This is an extra area. We have the Wilson teacher in there. We have, sometimes there could be a little bit of overlap. So this room is used, it used to be the 2nd floor faculty area for them to gather in, but now it has become a space for the students. Oh, and you know what? I want to say one thing. With the gymnasium, and I know, again, just piggybacking on some questions that had been asked prior, we do have 10 classes that need to double up for physical education. That's it.
Okay, and then this would kind of be a
right.
summary.
Sorry. And the summary. So I think I pretty much covered all of this, but the cafeteria, there is issues with some seating in the serving areas. I had gone over just an example of the 5th grade. The gymnasium and the library is adequate in size. The music, some of it is on the auditorium stage, and the supplemental or the itinerant music classes, they do share a space, but they don't have to share it at the same, time with the creative scheduling. Art, that's the same room. With special education, right now, we have it under control. It is adequate. And then all of the different areas that I had mentioned before. The psychologist and the social worker, they're actually over in the administration area, in the main office area. That's adequate. The computer room, that went away 7 years ago. And administration space is adequate. Thank you.
So here's a summary of the enrollment history and the enrollment projections going forward. The highest projected enrollment here is projected for the school year 2019-20 with the highest projected enrollment of 758, and the average after that between that year and 2027 being 742. This is the table that you've seen before, calculating optimum classroom capacity. This shows 717. That is actually below what we would see at highest projected enrollment. And in fact, the school started out with 731 students this year. So they're already at a bit of a deficit going forward. I think if you'll recall back to the presentation, there was one room that was shared for art, music, and gifted. That room could potentially become a classroom, and these numbers would change, but that would put some of those programs on an itinerant basis, and they would be searching for a gifted space. So here's an overhead view of the school. This is a couple of years old. We still see some construction activity back here. Gladwin is a combination of R1, R2 zoning districts, so it is a bit more restrictive. And based on the amount of impervious surface that is permitted and what is currently on hand, we only have about 1,373 square feet of additional impervious that we could add. And we'll be happy to take any of your questions.
Mr. Fetterman, any questions?
No, thanks for the presentation.
Okay. Ms. Ackman? Mr. Bonaventura? Dr. Gilbert?
I'll just ask the same question again, which is around, for special education support classrooms. Are you also in smaller size classrooms for those rooms? Are they regular size classrooms? What's the?
So I would say it's a little bit of both. So the one classroom, that 118A and 118, that wall that just went up, that was a full-size classroom that was split in half. But they each still have their own windows, their own space. Once you're in it, it's actually a very nice space and enough room for the amount of kids that are in there currently.
Can I make a general comment about special education classrooms? So there are requirements that we have for those spaces. I think a key thing to remember is that the students in those instructional groups are much smaller than your general education classrooms. So the number of students in that space at any given time varies, but is much smaller. So, the space is also relevant to that. And we are meeting the requirements for the space size and location as per PA school code.
My question's for Pat. Pat, could you remind us when we did the building a few years ago, how many classes we added, and just, some of the issues that we were facing when we added significantly to the Gladwin campus?
We added 4 classrooms, and they show up in this photograph as the whitish roof right here. And in addition to that, we added some additional parking over in this area. We did not add any core space at all. We just added the classrooms. Right.
Right, and how many years before that did we add 4 other classrooms? Was it like 5 years?
In the big renovation of 03-05, we added 4 classrooms.
Okay, and then, what, 10? 4 additional. Then 4 more. So we've added 8. It's funny. My children went to Marion under the wonderful Miss Hevron. And she was brilliant making them all fit then, because there was 600 kids at Marion and none of the new classroom space. So she was able to squeeze them in back then. And then of course we moved to Gladwin, where we didn't have those 8 classrooms, and it was up to 600 kids again. So I do have to say our principals really are creative and thoughtful in how they use their space.
I forgot to ask Ms. Ellers to comment on pickup and drop-off. You know, it's unique at every school, but every school's got it under control from what I've been able to see.
Okay, I'd love to talk about this. So now, keep in mind there are 22 buses that come to Gladwin, and I would say there's less than 15 people that are designated walkers in all of Gladwin. So 15, yeah. So we have the large circle here is for the buses. All of the kids, they gather in the gymnasium, and as their buses come, they're called out to get onto their school buses. Only school buses are allowed in and out of this exit, which goes out to Marion Square Road. Now, the car line, that's this smaller circle, which you have to come in and exit this way. And it takes you all the way out. Part of the line may scooch in here and then go all the way out and down here. Probably starting at about 3 o'clock, you'll see the first car lining up there for pickup. Then we have, for kids that get picked up, or the walkers, they gather in the lobby, and they exit through the main, actually they go through the auditorium and then out to the main area. Now, the parents usually park, we're lucky that we have Gladwin Park, which is off the picture here, but Gladwin Park is up there, so we have some parking that we borrow from time to time, and then they walk down here to pick up the kids.
Mrs. Pollard, anything?
I just wanted to ask, the 2 areas for music, you have one area on the stage and then you have another whole room for music. Are they 2, is it choral, instrumental, or?
So there's 2 rooms for the choral, for the main music time. Then on the stage, and then sometimes it may spill out into the lobby, that's for instrumental.
Mrs. Pollard is our music person. Ms. Robinson?
Thank you for the presentation. My kids had a great time at Gladwin, and one of the things that my last one mentioned was that with the increased numbers, from 500 it went up to 750 or so, pretty close to that. They weren't allowed to do things in the bus line and had to read. Is that still the case?
So they're all lined up in the gym. They line up by their bus number, and as long as they're sitting there quietly, they don't have to read. Some choose to read, but as long as they're sitting there and they're not bothering others and we can hear bus numbers being called, they pretty much have the freedom to do what they want.
Mr. Driscoll?
Real quick, Pat, I think, does this site have adequate parking? I don't believe there's any in reserve, and there's probably not much neighborhood parking, but how are we doing for car parking on this site?
I would say that during the day, this is filled up with staff, and some of the lot that the principal referred to over here, which is part of Gladwin Park, we kind of jointly use it. We even plow the snow in the wintertime. Because of the fact that we do use it. I think you will see the same issues if there's a grade level event or if there's a district-wide event in the evening, that parking is pretty dear.
Dr. O'Leary? No? All right. Open up from public comment, Ms. LaPera. Thank you very much.
I don't have anyone on the list. Has that changed? Okay. You want to go ahead and sign in? Got that out there? Okay.
Hi, Tanya Schreiber, Penguin. And a quick question. So now that they've reached their impervious surface limit and they have more children then they can handle with the 90% utilization. What would be the plan going forward since they're going to exceed their capacity in the next 2 to 3 years? Curious, since it seems like Penguin might face the same situation shortly.
Well, we wouldn't be, my understanding, Pat, is we would not be able to build anything on Gladwin. We've worked with the principals on what programs they would have to give up within the building. Is that correct?
Right, and as I mentioned, there is one room that is currently shared, art, music, and gifted, that could potentially become another grade level classroom, and then that would have an impact on those programs.
We're ready for Penn Valley. For the record, this is the last school. We were getting along so well.
Good morning. Oh, evening. All right, little tour of the facility. So we are a ranch building. We have one floor. I'll break it down by grade level. Walk in the main entrance and down this long hallway. We've got all of first grade here. This is being utilized as a first grade classroom, even though it was not designed as a first grade classroom. Gymnasium and storage. This is a very long, narrow room that's being used for learning support that was not designed to be instruction space. These are offices, and then we have classrooms down here, first and second grade. These are all offices, nursing suite, main office. Cafeteria. The cafeteria we utilize, we do one grade level at a time, and that definitely fits our needs at Penn Valley. When I started back in 2009, we had 465 kids. We're at 672 students right now. We used to be able to double up classes in the cafeteria, but we can no longer do that. In terms of the gym, we double up 12 gym classes, kindergarten through 5th grade. So we do have to do that because we do have so many classes and sections of grades. Coming down this hallway here, we've got our library. We have some more autistic support classrooms here, and these are our kindergarten classrooms. This is a kindergarten-only playground. This is all fenced in here. These two classrooms dump out into here for just kindergartners. Auditorium. Behind the auditorium, we have stage area. We have taken our instrumental music room and turned that into a learning support classroom. So now all of our instrumental music is on the stage. And we have our vocal music here. These are second grade classrooms. These are third grade classrooms, art room, gifted support. Fourth grade and second grade on the ramp area. This was a full-sized classroom, but when we grew, our enrollment grew, so did our special education population. So we split this. It used to be a 4th grade classroom. It's now 2 learning support classrooms. They each have their own doorway, and they are totally separate. And then we have 4th grade rooms here. These 4 classrooms were added onto the building when our enrollment started to grow significantly. We added 4 classrooms on to meet the needs of our growing enrollment. I'd like to fast forward to slides 67 and 68, if that's okay. That's his stuff, but I want to.
This is the comparison of the.
So I've heard a lot tonight about. I'll jump. Why? I've heard a lot tonight about hard surface, and I think that slide 67 says a lot about what we're dealing with on snow days and things like that. So
Just talk through it.
Sure. We have, per student, we have 5 square feet of hard surface. It's the lowest amount in the district. So I heard people saying that there's no running. Yet there's no running at Penn Valley when there's snow days because we can't even get in there to plow those areas. So we have our recess periods in the front parking lot, and we cone it off so that the kids can at least get outside and get some fresh air. So we are dealing with the smallest amount of square footage of hardscape. Now, we sit on a sprawling almost 15 acres. When it's nice out, we're really fortunate. We use that space for phys ed classes. When we double up, we're outside, and just in terms of utilization. But somebody mentioned, I think it was a community member, saying we live in Pennsylvania, and it rains a lot and it snows, and we have a lot of days where we can't be outside. So, or when we do go outside, we're hard top only. Core spaces, the cafeteria and library are definitely adequate. The gym, we do double up 12 classrooms. We have 10 sections of art class that are on a cart. They are not in the art classroom. And vocal music, same thing. We have 10 sections that are either, with creative scheduling, they are either in a classroom or they are in the auditorium. When instrumental music is not being held in the auditorium, we can schedule music, the music classes in there for that itinerant music. Special education classrooms, we've taken away the instrumental music room. We took away that long, skinny room, which is now special education. And as Ms. Frazier said, they all meet the square footage as required by law to meet the needs of our special education students, but they were not designated as those types of areas. In terms of office spaces, it's all adequate. We do not have a computer room and have not had a computer room for many years, and our administrative space is adequate as well.
Similar to the other schools, this is a recap of enrollment history and enrollment projections going forward. Curiously enough, next year is the highest projected enrollment at Penn Valley of 689 students. After that, they are projected to average about 650 students. Looking again at a similar capacity table, we come up with a Lower Merion optimum classroom capacity of 684. And at highest projected enrollment, we are almost there, slight deficit. And then beyond that, we do see some availability of classroom space. This is a picture from overhead. As the principal pointed out, this is a large site. It's almost 15 acres. It's in the R1 district, which is the most restrictive. Our total allowable is 28.55%. And based on what's already on site, we have about 2,500 square feet remaining.
Use that slide and talk about busing. So in terms of parent pickup and drop off, so this is the front of the building, Writers Mill Road. The buses all come in here in the morning. We have about 20 buses. In terms of walkers, we have, similar to Gladwin, about 15 kids that will walk to school. The rest are bus to school or parent drop-off. We worked with the Lower Merion Police Department, and we made this Margot Lane one way for 15 minutes in the morning. All the families are directed to come this way on Margot Lane. We have 2 drop-offs, one here for this sidewalk into the building and one here for this sidewalk into the building. Parents all park, it's a pull-up, so they pull up, they don't get out of their car, they don't park the car, well they do to let the kids out, but they don't sit. It's not like they open the door and kick them out. Yeah. So it is a pull up, they drop, they go. The next group of cars pull up, they drop, they go. We changed that this year. And then when they come out this way, they can go either direction. Just kind of backtracking, this is a hardscape here, and this is a hardscape here for playground. And then there's one little blacktop here where there's basketball courts. That's our hardscape for playing. So we did change drop off and pick up on Margot Lane, because in the afternoon we did the same thing. We made it one way in the afternoon. And then we've also revised how we dismiss. We've split the kids by alphabet between the 2 doors and have tried to streamline the process to get them out quickly at the end of the day.
I just wanted to, what our registrar tells us is that we get about how many over the course of the summer? 270? We get about 270 students, majority of those elementary. We get a lot of students from multiple occupancy units during the summer. And if you look, if the public looks at the foam boards that we have there, and the board has them in front, and we'll flash it again. I don't know if you want to go to the front of the presentation. What he's doing is so if you look at that, I asked from my own point of reference to have 3 roads darkened. Lancaster, could you point that out, Pat? Montgomery Avenue and Conshohocken, just for a point of reference. So you can take a look along Montgomery Avenue. You can see the number of multiple occupancy units that feed into the Penn Valley catchment area. And one of the things that we're watching there, of course, again, and this is a point of disagreement amongst our demographers, is how many students we can expect out of multiple occupancy units. And we have, I think it was 150 units that have been approved, apartment units, right around Suburban Square Mall. Did I get that right, Pat?
Well, there's, my understanding, there's 2 proposed developments that had not been on our radar before, and they have not yet been approved.
Oh, they have not been approved?
No.
Oh, okay. So we're concerned about that, the future of that along that stretch. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Pat.
Bob, can I just ask a question about that? So we get, with multiple occupancy, we get last-minute summer registrations. Do we get a lot of last-minute summer withdrawals?
Do we get a lot of them?
That's when a lot of our withdrawals get reconciled, because we get formal notice from the family that they've in fact moved or found another home elsewhere. We do have a lot of movement within the district too that we need to reconcile, but the pace of the new enrollees far outpaces the withdrawals.
I'll open it up for questions. Dr. O'Leary, back to you. Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you. My question, I guess, is sidewalks. My kids went to Penn Valley. My understanding of sidewalks is Penn Valley, the school, at least has a sidewalk on Haggis Ford Road and a sidewalk up, why am I drawing a blank? Writers Mill, thank you. But those are the only sidewalks within maybe half a mile. I don't think there's any other sidewalks there. The next nearest sidewalk would be at Welsh Valley, where there's a sidewalk up Tower Lane and the continuing sidewalk along Haggis Ford Road. So long story short, because also a lot of the community don't know this district built the sidewalk on Haggis Ford Road in front of Penn Valley and Haggis Ford Road along Welsh Valley. And I have asked the commissioners, when will you connect these? When can you make it more walkable so we get more than 15 kids walking? And it's not going well. So your school district has plunged a ton of money into sidewalks at Penn Valley and Welsh Valley, and we're not getting much traction on completing that. So when I heard the one parent talk about the Trent Road sidewalk, school district put in its sidewalk. I asked to work with the township to finish it out. I thought we should do it all in one shot. If we could do it together, maybe economy scale, save some money, not a ton of money. Hasn't happened. For those who don't know, we had the intergovernmental structure recently. I asked, when will you finish the sidewalk at Trent Road? The answer was, not now. That the $100,000 they have set aside will not be used for sidewalks this year. So it'd be nice to improve our walkability, but we need a little bit of help. So with that said, I'll move on.
Ms. Robinson? Ms. Pollard? I don't have any. Dr. Gilbert? Mr. Bonaventura?
Just a quick comment. 2 comments, actually. Regarding the sidewalks, in defense of the township, they have to basically, No, they have to get the property owner to build the sidewalk, and they either have to condemn the property owner's property and take the sidewalk area, or they have to somehow incentivize the property owner to put the sidewalk in, and that's, in their defense, it's not an easy task. Should some of that should they try and do some of it? Absolutely, but it's not an easy task. The other comment I wanted to make was, just as with Gladwin, we added 4 classrooms twice, correct, Pat? Once in, what is it, 05, 06, and then once again a little bit later?
Correct.
On the same timing as Gladwin too, right? They were both
Yes, I think the
pretty
first time around it might have, yeah, it was 4 classrooms, correct.
Yeah, so if you look at the 2 ends that go up, you know, there's probably,
Right. Again, the lighter colored roof.
well, that's the most recent one, right? Because the other one was on both sides of the spoke, but just as information.
Right. That's the newest. Others were built down here with the library and 2 out at the end.
It's been a long night. I mainly just wanted to thank Pat and all the principals and the administration for putting this together. I think this was a great comprehensive overview, and it was great to hear from the folks leading the buildings also about the program and the challenges. And, you know, we're blessed with all these amazing neighborhood elementary schools, and then we're, you know, all dealing with the challenge of neighborhood elementary schools with tricky geographies and neighbors who care. And I also just wanted to commend the administration, and especially Pat, for making the schools very attractive parts of the community, and I think integrated parts of the community to the extent that they can be. And hopefully the public got a sense that there's a lot of different challenges in each school, and there's not that many easy answers to be found at the moment. So thanks for putting this together, and I think the next dialogue with the secondary schools will also be really important and interesting for the community to hear. Thank you.
We couldn't have done it without Mrs. Heffron.
I agree.
I just want to echo what Lori just said. I mean, if it was easy, I don't think we'd be here. So, and there isn't any easy answer, and I hope that's one at least takeaway that everyone should get from these presentations, is that there are a lot of kids and not a whole lot of space.
So now, public comment.
Yes.
Thank you.
Rebecca Seidel-Nini and Tanya Schreiber. And anyone else that would like to sign in, please come up now.
I'm Rebecca Seidel-Nini. I have 2 children in Penwyn. And I think I approached this meeting with kind of a narrow view, only thinking of Penwyn. And what my eyes were open to is the multitude of problems, but also the kind of the broader themes that I've heard tonight. And I just wanted to reiterate what I heard from some other public comments, which was to think broadly in fixing the issues that come up. The issues that we kind of come up against in Penwyn are echoed at Marion, at Penn Valley. And I just hope that you guys will keep an open mind and think broadly and creatively and continue doing good work for our kids. Thank you.
Tanya Schreiber, Penwyn, and I guess you've heard me say this before, but when we see it all laid out like this and how dire the situation is across the schools, especially for Gladwin, and going back to the fact that as you listed each school in their peak year, they each have a different peak year, that the amount of students peaked in 2015 at the elementary school level. Now, I know everybody wants to hedge their bets, but to talk about schools losing art and music because we think we'll exceed the 2015 numbers when the data says it doesn't, when we just watched a whole presentation that said every school is going to peak and dip at different times, and that Gladwin is going to lose these programs right away. You can't do it anymore. You can't build where the kids are going to show up anymore. And I just don't think it's fair to Gladwin to do that to them when there's ways. I think you just have to look at the fact that, you have to start getting more creative about how important it is. We've got to make some value judgments. I know that the value judgment right now is to say that neighborhood stabilization is more important than anything else, but maybe it's my bias. I think art and music's more important than neighborhood stabilization if it means that Gladwin doesn't have to lose those classrooms in the next 2 years. Thank you.
Dave Pollard?
So I think the issue is that we're not reducing the programs. We are making some accommodations based on the space that we have available, but the programs themselves are not being cut back.
Hi, I'm Dave Pollard, and I live in the Penn Valley School area, and my son will be starting first grade there in the fall. One of the common threads was that all the schools seem to have lost their computer lab. So I had a general question, which was, how do they teach computers now? Is it in the classroom? Are the computers provided by the school? Do kids have their own computers? But how do they address the fact that they've lost the computer labs? The general theme of tonight is the overcrowding at certain schools. This is the first time my son will be going to school. So last year, which schools wound up having to bus kids to partner schools? Is there an estimate or preliminary estimate this year, or for this year coming up, which schools might be overcrowded and might have to bus kids to other schools? And lastly, kind of a particular question, if you live in the school district and are registered, but you move within the school district to a different catchment area, would your child still be subject to being bused to a different school? So for example, if I live in Penn Valley and move to Gladwin, but Gladwin is overcrowded, is there a chance my son would be bused to Belmont Hills or some other school if the school that we move into is overcrowded? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll let Mrs. Schaefer answer your last question. Your first question is, yes, the computer program by and large has been put on carts and is brought into the classroom at the elementary level. In terms of what happens with people who move within the district?
It would depend on the time of the move. We have incorporated those movers into our partner school process, and that if the settlement date isn't until after the May 1st deadline, they would be placed in the partner school if there is an available space in the school zone that they're moving into. So they would be subject to the partner school process.
But as you said earlier, as of the enrollments right now, no, that we can accommodate what we have?
We can, but I think what the gentleman was referring to is, suppose you made a move in, say, January. Is that, where'd he go? So is that what you're saying?
I thought he asked 3 questions.
But what if you move now after the May 1st deadline and you move
So if you
from
move now after the deadline, you would be subject to a partner schooling?
Is there a preliminary estimate? It sounds like at this moment there's no expectation that there will be busing between schools?
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. I think we really have to wait and see what happens over the summer.
Thank you.
For example, this past year, correct me if I'm wrong, the only partner school moving that we had to do was because of overcrowding in classes at Kinwood, and they all came from Royal Athena Apartments. We didn't really see that one coming, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Oh, yeah, I lost him again. Okay.
Natasha Davis, Penguin. 2 questions. I believe in some recent history you discussed that the board would retain the right to assign apartment complexes to schools. Is that correct?
The board policy reads that prior to them, I guess, being constructed,
Okay. And my second question is, while we're talking about partner schooling, I think the board meeting last month, there was a suggestion to entertain the idea of voluntary partner schooling, that when people go to register or people who are currently in a school, that if they could come forward as volunteers to sort of facilitate partner schooling to make it feel, I don't know, a little more voluntary. Can you speak to that a little?
So it was discussed twice. It was discussed once at the policy committee briefly, and it was also discussed at facilities and purchasing. We currently have a situation where if a parent wants to ask for an attendance exception and they fall under certain categories, it goes through Mrs. Schaefer's office and we make a determination. That doesn't include the reduction of class size. That would have to be an adjustment in the administrative regulation.
How do you find out what those requirements are?
Mrs. Schaefer has them committed to memory.
The language right now talks about granting requests based on social, emotional, or behavior needs of the student, which would be evaluated at the building level based on those needs. And that's our administrative regulation 206. So for further reading, you could.
Okay, so there's really nothing that just says, you know, I'm near the border, my school is like so overcrowded, I'd rather go to this other school. There's nothing that would allow for that at this time?
Not currently.
Not currently.
Okay. Could you please consider it?
Is there more to the discussion, or do you want to summarize? Or
we have some comparisons.
Okay, do you want to do that
spaces
quickly?
And I think this will be on the record, and I'm sure folks will want to come back to it. But Pat did take the opportunity to look at the elementary school comparisons of various core spaces.
Right. I knew there was a lot of interest.
Yeah, this is on the website.
Right. So with the help of the architect, we put this together. The first chart here compares PE space and cafeteria space. So let me just explain how this is laid out. We have our 6 elementary schools here. We have the highest projected enrollment for each one. And then we have the square footage of the gym, physical education space. In order to come up with a comparison, we divided the highest projected enrollment number into that square footage and came up with a value. You can then compare these values across the different schools and get an idea of who would have more space than others, if you will.
So let me just hasten to add, this is the idea was for comparative purposes. So we're not looking to necessarily put 236 kids into a cafeteria. It's just for comparative purposes.
Right, and so we did the exact same thing for cafeteria seating area. And this doesn't imply that there's only 2.5 square foot per student in the cafeteria. This is just a number calculated so you could compare across the district. And this is a similar comparison, just using, dividing the available space by 15 square feet per student. We also took a look at art space. So again, this chart is set up very similarly with the schools, with the highest projected enrollment, with the amount of art space. And in most of these cases, this space is the art room that's in the building. So some buildings have larger art rooms than others. Again, we've computed a number you can use to compare, and we've also noted whether school has art on a cart or whether they have their supplementary art in a shared space. Okay, good night. So this is a similar comparison for music. In this case, we've looked at vocal music space, instrumental music space, and whether there's music on a cart. So a lot of this summarizes what you heard the principals say this evening. For example, at Marion, there is no vocal music space. It is on a cart. Instrumental music is on the stage at 3 of our schools. So again, a comparison of music space. And then I have 2 charts that talk about the sites. I know I brought up each site individually, talked about how large it was, zoning district, et cetera. This is a summary of the amount of space that's available. Again, the acreages are the same. In the case of Kinwood here, in order to do this comparison, I decided that we would award half of the field inside the track to Kinwood and half to Bala Kinwood. So when I did that, I came up with a theoretical value of 4.3 acres for Kinwood. And then that allotted them some green space. So this is a tabulation of how much soft surface play area is at each school, and that is the wood chip area that's around our playground equipment that's fixed in space. Hard surface is self-explanatory, and then green space is what is the amount of green space that's left. And the number for Penguin does not take into account the fact that we now have temporary classroom sitting there, and that would in fact lower it by about 20,000 square feet. So I did something very similar. I looked at the highest projected enrollment for each school, and then I divided that into the various values. So this is an acre per student number, and again, it's only there for comparison, and you can see that Penn-Wynne, Kinwood are the smallest on that basis, and then computed that highest projected enrollment, divided it into the square footage for soft surface, hard surface, and green space play area. So again, I think there's no surprises here. Kinwood, Penn-Wynne, smallest soft surface play area, and green space, same story, Penn-Wynne and Kinwood. And this number, of course, would be even lower if we take into account the modular classrooms.
Just quickly, Pat, for Belmont Hills, you have the large wooded area outside the playground. Are those numbers included in as?
They are not. For green space, I only measured the green space that is used by the school. So for example, at Penn-Wynne, I did not use the area between the school and Haverford Road. As somebody rightly pointed out, it's not really usable, so I didn't count that.
I just wanted to mention, because I've heard a lot of people in the community talking about the possibility for volunteering. We have talked about it a couple of times now. We're still talking about it, but I think that it's probably not as clear of why it's so complicated. So for example, would you give transportation to those kids, and then what would that do to your sort of transportation situation? Or another example would be, what would happen if you move children from one school to another, and then somebody who's a walker moves in across the street, and you now have to move them to another school? And another issue is around the 311. So would you allow people to volunteer to a different feeder pattern for middle school and high school, and then what could be the impact of that? Or do they want to go back? Or I'm forgetting. I know I'm doing. We talked about.
You've covered them, I think.
Have I covered them all in one? But and I know there was the other issue about siblings, right? I know. So there were just a lot of different issues which we started talking about, but it's not. It's just not as simple as it sounds kind of simple. So we are talking about it, and then the question would be, would you be able to have enough children move on a volunteer basis that would actually change, things we would need to do at a particular school. So these are issues. We have heard people talking about it and asking about it, and we have been discussing it. And I don't think we've come to any final decisions, but it's more complicated than I think it seems, initially.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Please.
So in summary, a lot of what Pat and the principals presented tonight is summarized from the facilities report that Gilbert Architects put together. Has that been officially completed, Pat?
No, but
Okay.
it can be very shortly.
So
I'm sure.
once that is, we'll make sure that that's available for folks so that we can see that, so that people
Excuse me,
can
I know that I regularly say this, but there are a lot of new folks in the room. I have no relation to Gilbert Architects, just in case anybody's wondering. It has nothing to do with me.
So, so that report will be available soon. I also wanted to indicate that in addition to June 14th, talking about the secondary schools, we'll also want to talk about Arnold Field and some other kinds of issues that are, and bus parking and things of that nature with that. And that concludes.
So before we close, just a thank you to Mr. Copeland and the administration, and a special thank you to all of our principals for staying up late with us and sharing all the amazing things going on in your schools despite some of the challenges we face with enrollment growth. And also a thank you to the public for bringing us your questions and concerns. The board takes them seriously, and we will be deliberating again around the secondary schools, as Mr. Copeland mentioned, on Monday, June 14th at 7 p.m. in this room. Additionally, there will be an electronic survey that will mirror to some degree the mailer that went out a few weeks ago to start to get a sense of where folks are, particularly folks who can't show up at a meeting for a variety of reasons, so that we can get a good sample of what the community says about some of these issues we're facing. And so with that, we hope to see you on June 14th for the second part of this meeting, or this discussion. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.